right, everyone. Hello.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
I think it's going well, at least over here. What about you?
Yeah, it's going great. It's been too long, I feel like. I know we were just saying that we need to get Svelte Radio back up, and
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that it's been 2 years since we've seen each other in person at Svelte Summit. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's wild.
excited to.
It's like you said before when we were talking before, like time moves fast and slow at the same time.
I know it's crazy how time can be both at the same time, it seems like. But I'm very glad to be back with a lot of the Svelte community and here listening to all the fun Svelte talks, and it's always a good time.
Speaking of talks, we have some amazing talks coming up today. A bunch of different subjects, but before we head into the talks, I'd like to mention our sponsor. Repoli is how I think you say it. Hopefully, I'm not butchering that name too much, but there is a risk. But yeah, so welcome everyone to the what number is this again? I always forget. It's like the 9th virtual Svelte conference. Or
Okay,
Svelte
I
Summit.
was like, I am not sure. I know we have like 2 a year, but
yeah, how many is that? 1, 2, 3. When did we start? The first one was called Svelte Society Day, I think. It wasn't even called Svelte Summit. But yeah, so there's been a bunch of these. And I see our sponsor in the chat. He's saying I nailed the name, so that's good to know. That's good to know. But yeah, so yeah, should we get into the talks?
Yeah, thank you to all the sponsors. Also, just wanted to mention, please, everyone, follow our code of conduct. We have that online. I do not have the link handy, but I will get one and drop that in the chat. We are talking along to them in the Svelte Summit channel in Discord if you want to join us there, or in the YouTube comments. But please, everyone, remember to be kind and just enjoy the talks.
Yeah. So first up, if you are interested in testing and SvelteKit, maybe this might be a talk for you. Also, if you like cucumbers, this might also be a talk for you. Or gherkins, which I just learned is a pickled cucumber, I think. At least according to Wikipedia.
Aren't all pickles cucumbers?
I would think so, but like, what's a gherkin?
I don't know.
Is that just especially
Maybe we'll find out.
Pickle? Maybe we'll find out. Yes. All right. Here's the talk. All right.
Hi everyone. I'm David Hunt. I'm here to talk about behavioral testing with a gherkin, or cucumber as it's sometimes called, in SvelteKit. Now, I've long time been a fan of behavioral testing and gherkin syntax in particular, and I'm excited to share some of that enthusiasm with you. Hopefully, 10 minutes from now, you'll have a good understanding of what gherkin is, and the 2 important points about it, and the 2 devious problems that it helps to solve, and how to get it set up with SvelteKit using QuickPickle, which is my new baby project on GitHub, and then how to use it for testing your websites and or components. So I'm going to be using the Svelte demo app that comes with npm create svelte at latest. And we're going to be looking at the Svelte game. So hopefully you're familiar at least a little bit with that. And everything that I do today will be available on GitHub. So let's take a look at the playwright tests that the demo app ships with. Here it is on the right, and then on the left is the same test in Gherkin. Note the keywords like feature, rule, scenario, given, then. These are the things that most people associate with Gherkin syntax. But as you'll see later, they're not really that important. What I would like you to understand is that this file runs as a test. So if I do pnpx vitest, then this will run, and you can see right there that our frontpage.feature file is passing. And it does this because behind the scenes, these steps are translated into step definitions. Here's the first one, given I am on string. And then that code runs as the tests run. And these step definitions can be reused across all your tests and even across projects. So if we wanted to add another rule, that says that the site must function without JavaScript, we could copy this same test under a tag that says to turn off JavaScript, and then in the future, if someone devious should change our site, should break it so that it doesn't work without JavaScript, when we have this test, it'll run again. It'll show us that our site doesn't work without JavaScript. And then that test is failing. So even in this brief overview, you can see the two most important points of Gherkin syntax. You write your tests in natural language, i.e. English for us, or whatever language your team speaks. And you write reusable, discrete step definitions with minimal code. And taken together, those two key points, Gherkin mitigates the two biggest problems in integration testing, which for the purpose of being memorable, we'll call the fingers pointing at an imaginary moon and who tests the testers. All right, so the first problem, fingers pointing at an imaginary moon, you probably recognize that it refers to a Zen Buddhist idea that words are like a finger pointed at the moon. They can't hold the essence of an idea, but are mere tools that we use to approach a truth that is inherently greater. And your functional requirements are like this, except that the moon doesn't even exist yet. You haven't built the product. So it's incredibly difficult to reach a common understanding of the essence of your project, i.e., what does this do? And Gherkin helps with this because it gives you a common language, a common lexicon that everyone can use to both describe and verify the most important aspects of your application. And then the second problem, who tests the testers? So imagine for a moment that your testers all perfectly understand exactly what you want. I mean, it can't happen in real life, but imagine it, and they're working hard to make sure that every time code is created or changed, it gets tested. The problem is, ideally, the test code then should just never change. But functionality changes all the time. So if your integration tests are written in code, then they're changing with the functionality. And if they're changing, then you should test them. And before you know it, you have two projects. One of them is your original project, and the other one is the project that you used to test the original project. And very quickly, integration testing becomes simply unmanageable. So let's take a look at how this works in real life by using Gherkin to test this Svelte game. And for this purpose, I've drawn up some functional requirements, and we're going to convert them into tests, both in Gherkin and also in Playwright. And in Gherkin, this is as simple usually as just deleting all of these bullet points and typing the word scenario. And then you have the basic of your test file. Now, I was going to set up some sort of a coding battle where I would work in Gherkin and Claude Dev would work in pure Playwright, but we were both so bad at writing the steps and tests in Playwright that it was too painful to share. So that was quick. Yes, so what we have here is two separate files, one on the left for our Gherkin feature, and one on the right that is the same thing in Playwright, but doesn't quite work because only the first four tests work. And both of these run, one of them with Playwright through the test integration, and one of them with Vitest. Now let's take a look at these two files, starting with the Gherkin feature on the left. And right away, to me, this looks very clear and comprehensible. Here are our requirements. Typing letters should work with JavaScript enabled. And the steps are very clear. When I type the following keys, T-I-T-L-E, then row 1 should be title. You know, in my consulting work, I don't interact only with developers. I talk with project managers, business analysts, subject matter experts, grandmothers and parents, marketers, all kinds of people. And I'm confident that I could show them this file and a picture of our app, and every one of them would be able to contribute to a meaningful conversation about what our app is doing and what it should do. And for this last scenario here, letters and guesses should be highlighted. Well, we have some visual requirements for how they're highlighted maybe, but I don't have to worry about what exactly those are. I can just say the screenshot Svelte should match. And then when I run the test, it'll take a picture of that in a PNG format. And the next time it runs it, it's just a quick visual regression test to make sure that our design requirements are met with every release. All right, now looking over at the playwright file, oops, there's the playwright file. You know, there's no way that I could show this to most of the people on my team. It would just be unreasonable for me to expect it to interest or engage them at all. And instead, we'll probably end up talking in circles or in separate conversations where important ideas about our product could simply be lost because there's no way to capture them, like fingers pointing to an imaginary moon. So this is good, but then in real life there will be bugs and new feature requests, like people should be able to choose easy, medium, or hard mode with different numbers of guesses. And right away, I can sketch this new rule in Gherkin, and this is what people mean when they say behavior-driven development. Here's the test before we have the feature done, because AI might be terrible at writing playwright tests, but it is really good at parsing natural language, like the ones in our Gherkin tests. So I'm just going to ask Claude, in the feature file, there are some tests for the new feature that are marked with the to-do tag. The new feature is to allow people to choose easy, medium, or hard mode. Please change the files, these files accordingly so that this is possible. Bear in mind you will have to change the structure of the cookie, which stores the game state, and you'll have to add buttons which should look reasonably nice. Just like that, and we'll let Claude work away over here in the corner while I show you how to install and configure QuickPickle. QuickPickle makes Gherkin features run in Vitest, while QuickPickle Playwright provides test frameworks for the browser and a bunch of step definitions. You'll always need a step definition file, and you should always name it something.steps.ts or js. In this file, you import or set up your world variable and import or write your step definitions. Add QuickPickle to vite.config.ts and make sure that Vitest recognizes your feature files and your step definitions. If you have multiple environments, you can also use a vitest.workspace.ts file. Finally, for tooling, do not use the top result for Gherkin. Try the official Cucumber plugin for VS Code. Then configure the Cucumber glue setting to get some code completion, which is why you should name your step definition files consistently. And we can see that Claude is done. And if we remove those to-do flags, the tests mostly pass, except for a couple of the original ones. So there's stuff to fix, but if we go to the site, we can certainly see the new functionality, and we know it works because those tests already pass. And crucially, none of the actual code has changed. So you never have to ask who's testing the testers. Well, thank you very much for letting me talk at this summit. I hope you've got something out of it. I'm David Hunt. QuickPickle lets you run Gherkin features with Vitest, so give it a try, and hope to see you in person next time. Thanks.
All right, we're back. Now we know about pickles.
Yeah, I know. Now we know about pickles. Dominic was nice enough to ask or to put in the chat about what the pickling meant and Gherkin. And now we know more about behavioral testing in Svelte. That was really cool.
Yeah, it's really nice.
I feel like it was kind of like acceptable criteria like you get in Agile format and like that, but for tests. Like, so PMs, I know Hunta said in the chat, like, it's like your PMs could write your testing setup for you. I like that.
Yeah, it could be nice. Could be nice. I'm definitely going to give it a try at least.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, next up, we have headless WordPress shortcodes as Svelte components. If you've ever wanted to combine the ease of WordPress content management with the power and flexibility of Svelte, this talk will be for you. Elron is going to show us how to render WordPress shortcodes as Svelte components, making it simple to add interactivity to blogs, tutorials, and pages, all without leaving the familiar environment of WordPress. This approach is perfect for developers and content creators who want the best of both worlds. WordPress is user-friendly, edited, paired with Svelte's dynamic rendering. So here's Elron.
Everyone, my name is Elron, and I create fun and useful tools for creators at funweb.io. As you can see, most of the tools are made for Hebrew users, but some of the tools I created also in English. Today I'm excited to share with you one tool that I created that inspired me to create a new library called Svelte WP Shortcodes. Few years back, my main way to build website was using WordPress. That made me happy because I had full control over my website's look and feel because I could customize the code. For the same reason today I love using SvelteKit. One of the key things I love about WordPress is that it's a CMS, a content management tool. So basically it lets you be able to edit some content, save it, and when the page is shown to the user, he's going to see something different, more designed. But what happens if you want to have an interactive component like a contact form or a YouTube video? If the article was written in SvelteKit, it would be really easy. You would just do something like this and have the interactivity in this component. In WordPress, you would do something a little bit different. You would go ahead and install a thing called plugin. This, for example, Contact Form Serpent is a plugin that lets you create forms. So if we go to the plugin, you'll see this code. It's called a shortcode. What it lets you do is you can copy it and go to the page you want, just paste it in, and now if we save it and open it, it's going to show the form, and it also has interactivity. When I was creating my Svelte app confetti page, I had so many tutorials to write, but I didn't want to write any of them. I wanted to hand it off to someone else. But the problem is, she didn't know how to code. That's why I use WordPress as a headless CMS. That way she can use the visual editor to create the content, and then I would render it through SvelteKit. So this is the headless WordPress. You can see all the tutorials are written over here. And what SvelteKit does is it fetches all the information from the headless WordPress and presents it like this. Now I want to show you a magic. If you go inside one of the tutorials, you'll see the content, but it also has interactivity, like this YouTube video, or for example, this play button. How is it possible? Well, you know the answer already. I use shortcodes, of course, but not WordPress shortcodes, but Svelte shortcodes. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. If we edit this page, you can see it has these shortcodes. For example, YouTube. And Svelte knows that I want it to be presented like this play button, and when you hover, you have this black effect, and when you click on it, it's going to play the video. You can see I created a youtube.svelte component. If we go down, you can see that if it's played, then it's going to show the iframe, which is the embed of the YouTube video, and the V is replaced by the same variable we placed in the shortcode. And if we didn't click on play yet, it's going to show the play icon. One piece of the puzzle is the WordPress shortcode, and the second piece of the puzzle is the SvelteKit component. The question I ask myself is, how do I integrate both of these into one piece? So as you can tell, that inspired me to create a new library called Svelte WordPress Shortcodes. It's really straightforward to use the library. I'm going to show you how. Let's go ahead and open the demo. First of all, we're going to import the library. And we're going to use the component like this. It's going to accept two key value pairs, components and markup. Markup is basically the text that we received from WordPress. But as you can see, you don't need to use WordPress to use this. You can just use a string and it will work. The second key is components, and you're going to see a map over here. So hi, this one, is going to be replaced with the Svelte component hi button, which is this one. Note, you see over here, is going to be replaced with the note Svelte component. And you see this shortcode has a text inside, right? What happens then? Well, it's going to be rendered as a slot inside note. For YouTube, you can see we have key value pair of ID and some random text. You can use any key value pairs you want, like this. I decided it will be ID, but I can just say video instead. But then I would need to update it over here. To get a better understanding on how this works, let's go inside the Hi button component, this one. And we're going to see that when we press Hi, it's going to alert Hi, just like we specified over here. Now let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's say inside the WordPress, we want to create a shortcode that you can edit the message of the alert. What would you do then? Let's create a new shortcode. The new shortcode is going to be called alert button. It's going to say amazing, and inside the button I want to present this text. Now this shortcode doesn't do anything yet. You can see it's just presented as plain text. In order for it to be rendered, we need to specify the name of the shortcode, and the component is needed to be imported, and it's going to be paired with this shortcode. Alert button isn't defined yet, so let's create the component. Now nothing is rendered. So first of all, let's put the slot, and the slot is presented. Now we want to wrap it with a button. Add an event on it. Now we added the event, and we're going to add say. Now when we click on it, it's going to say amazing, because that's what it is. That's all for the demo. If you want, you can try it out and play around. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps, and if you want to reach out, ask me something, chat, I'm here.
And we're back.
And we're back.
Long time
What did
no see.
everyone think?
Yeah. What did everyone think?
Let us know
That
in
was
the
great.
chat.
lots of comments in the chat. People are excited.
I'm
I'll
not like
see.
extremely familiar with WordPress. I've never really used WordPress, so that was interesting to see what shortcodes are, how they work. Like it's just kind of a different form of markup, really, right? And if you're used to that, I could see how you might prefer that kind of markup.
Yeah. And with all the juicy WordPress drama going on at the moment, let's not
Is there juicy WordPress drama going on?
Oh, you've missed this?
I haven't.
Well, I don't think we should talk too much about this on.
Yeah, don't bring up the
later,
drama, but maybe later we'll
Yeah,
have to talk about it.
All right. So next up, we're gonna hear about.
I am living under a rock, Huntbite. Sorry.
Aren't we all, though?
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have Adventures in Adapting to Evolving Project Needs at the Australian National University. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
So it's about a developer designer's tale of ditching React for Svelte. We all like that. And some shenanigans with GSAP, Leaflet, and Scroll Trigger. So
Some cool animation.
let's see if we can get this talk up here. And here we go. And here we go.
I'll be talking about Mocking Country, scrollytelling project at the Australian National University. I'm Tabs, a developer and designer moving into DevRel. You can find me at ladyofcode.com or ladyofcode at any of these socials. I joined the project in 2018, and they originally were looking for a database developer because their previous project was a series of nested WordPress websites with custom databases. The current stack I'm looking at is Aurelia.js, Elixir, and Hurist at this point. Hurist is a specialist humanities software. The Laureate program is funded by the Australian National University and $3 million comes from the Australian Research Council grant. Don't get too excited, that's Australian dollars, which is about 2 million freedom dollars and 1.5 million pounds. The Research Centre for Deep History comes out of that. It expands history's timescale and scope. It focuses on human history in Australia, which is over 60,000 years old. It learns from Indigenous history, including time, people's embeddedness in country, stories and song, and it focuses on community collaborative research. So my colleagues had done their fieldwork around Australia, visiting Indigenous communities to work with them. In 2019, that's when we finally got our brand. Beautiful brand. These were my wireframes at the time. We were expecting to build a digital atlas. This was the original first version of the site from the Wayback Machine. Thank you, Wayback Machine. No marking country yet. So that stack from that point was Gatsby, which is React, Strappy, and that's all sitting on our RHEL server. I was still expecting to probably use Hearst at some point, but we didn't, I guess. So marking country itself visualizes Australia's deep history, far beyond the 2.5 centuries since the arrival of British ships. Scroll jacking is when your scrolling mechanism, the scroll wheel, the scrolling motion gets hijacked and causes your browser to behave in ways you may not expect. It can be quite polarizing, and people to this day hate it. From that we get scrollytelling, which is a portmanteau of scrolling and storytelling. So scrolljacking can be used well to tell stories. It also can be nice in some agency and portfolio websites, but outside of those, they're often a UX nightmare, so care has to be taken when implementing them. This is basically how it works. And in case it wasn't obvious, I built this website with a bunch of scroll triggers for some scrollytellingception. 2020, COVID, still nothing on marking country. 2021, small movement because we've been trying to get research for years. We end up having a map on the site, and I'm siloed from the team slowly because there's just too much content coming my way for me to handle. So it's funneled to me instead of having me in on all of the discussions. 2022, we have a soft launch of marking country finally. We have a demo video because there isn't enough to reliably live demo. I'm still making content the week before launch. There's no time to do testing. There were mixed reviews as I was designing on the fly. One of my favorite pieces of feedback was that it was too colonial. Appropriate. I fixed that because, I mean, years later, my design skills have improved vastly. Top tip, ensure people understand the difference between storyboards, wireframes, and mockups. If you are ever in a position where you have to provide these, it is good to clarify exactly what each of these are. We had issues. So there was a drastic redesign in which I attempted to capture more of the original brand. You can see the resemblance a little bit on the site. So it finally launches again in October 2023 with less than 2 weeks to go. I'm adding GSAP, the Green Sock Animation Platform libraries. I hate it. I'm still giving content. I'm still adding new features. I convert everything to Svelte. It seems to go well. So it took about a week. It was worth it. I think it was worth it. And the stress. It was worth it. So the final stack is pretty much just Svelte and WordPress. The university did choose WP Engine to host the WordPress websites. So I guess we'll see how that goes. And here's my site being launched in Washington, D.C. by Kevin Rudd, Australian ambassador to the US. This was a big moment for me. Funny story, he actually attended my 2016 graduation and sat next to my friend who spent the entire time wondering why people were coming up to this man asking for photographs like a celebrity. Because he was. And now it's 2024, the number of components I've built has doubled, and I am still fixing bugs. Okay, quick note, because I'm about to hate on React because it's fun. I do believe React has its strengths. I just had a lot of fun converting things from React to Svelte. Let's go. The first example we have is converting the useRef in React to the bind directive in Svelte. This is the relevant piece of code. Ref equals L boxrefs.current. And in Svelte, we simply just have bind this equals box index. GSAP does operate similarly in each. So when it is set up, there's a kind of a context created, and then the animation has to be cleaned up. In React, it's done inside useEffect. In Svelte, it's done in onMount. The cleanup happens here inside useEffect in React, but in Svelte, we use the onDestroyLifecycle function. I ended up making my own function to do cleanup eventually. This was fun, converting all of the React code using useState and useEffect into Svelte's reactive functions and variables. Arrays was also quite straightforward, changing over the map to the each logic blocks. Not a big difference here. The conditionals, in my opinion, the Svelte version is easier to read. Pages and roots. From this I learned that sometimes things being opinionated is good for me and better than my own opinions. Oh, I got rid of Sass. This felt like I was choosing joy. I could just move my CSS into the Svelte components and use one global CSS file instead of having to use a bunch of partials. It was great. Ah yes, getting rid of React and its one-way binding to make way for Svelte's two-way binding was a pleasure. As much as I love managing state in React, I'd rather not. So I didn't actually have to write the code on the left here. Thankfully, by the time I was using Svelte stores, I was creating more menus, more advanced features. I was just grateful that I didn't have to deal with React context and further state management. This is an example of one of my simpler components. It uses PhotoSwag, which is a JS library for media. Fairly straightforward. We just have the options here. I create the lightbox and it's just created in markup. It was a pain to add video, particularly to the galleries. And this is an example of the caption scroller component, which you will see a demo of shortly. We've got the GSAP code here, just the general markup on the right. There is the tick function that I had to use because sometimes the GSAP code we tried to execute before everything was fully loaded. So that's in pop-up. These are my sources. And thank you for reliving that journey with me and for the opportunity to do my first tech talk at Svelte Summit. I hope you have a good day. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line.
Hello.
Hey,
That was
welcome.
cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. I love the site. I love scrollytelling. scrollytelling? Am I saying that wrong?
Scrollytelling, yeah.
Scrollytelling that sounds really weird coming out of your mouth, but I do love to see it like in action. I know Penguin did a talk back at the live Svelte Summit we did in person about scrollytelling. It still sounds really weird.
Without slides as well, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's pretty wild for a tech talk. Yeah, great talk, Tabs.
Yeah.
Let's head on to the next one.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you, Tabs. Our next talk is all about supercharging your development workflow with SvelteKit, where James Camilleri will be presenting slide to the left.
Nope.
Am I on the wrong one?
You are on the wrong one. Yeah.
Ignore the last 30 seconds. Sorry about that.
So,
okay, maybe
or am I on the wrong
client. Is that the right one? Demystifying client?
That is the right one.
I just scrolled too far. Sorry about that. Okay, so our next talk is actually Demystifying Client and Server Rendering in SvelteKit by Henry Lai. SvelteKit builds on top of Svelte to help us create highly performant web apps, offering powerful features like routing, built-in optimization, and data preloading. But one of its standout capabilities is supporting multiple rendering strategies like SPA, SSR, SSG, all the acronyms, and more. That allows us to optimize performance based on the needs of our project. If you've ever found yourself confused by terms like server-side rendering or hydration, or you're wondering which strategy to use for your next project, Henry's talk will clear things up. He'll walk us through the various rendering strategies, explain what each one means, and demonstrate how flexible SvelteKit is by mixing and matching them in a single app. So without further ado, here's Henry.
My name is Henry Lee. Glad to be back at Svelte Summit again this year. Today I'll be talking about demystifying client and server rendering in SvelteKit. Let's get started. First of all, a bit about me. I live in Tokyo, Japan. I'm working at a company called Henge. We're building cloud security solutions for companies using cloud services such as Google Workspace and Microsoft 365. So first of all, what is SvelteKit? I'm sure everyone is familiar with Svelte. Svelte is a JavaScript framework for building UI components. SvelteKit is a meta framework that wraps around Svelte and provides a lot of tooling to build a complete performant web app, such as routing, server-side rendering, preloading, all that good stuff. It also supports a number of rendering strategies to cater to different needs. And so you might be asking, what are rendering strategies exactly? You might have heard about MPA, SPA, SSG, CSR, SSR. Like, what are all these alphabet soup, right? And there are also some highly technical words like pre-rendering or hydration. We'll get to that shortly. But first of all, I'd like to go with a bit of history of the popular rendering strategies over the years and how it evolved over time so that we can understand how it came to be as it is right now. So first of all, in the beginning of the internet, we have what we call the multi-page application paradigm and also static site generation. To be more precise, it's not really generation back then, it's like authoring static sites. And this is the era where the internet and the user's devices were slow. So the user's devices were so slow that it is practically impossible to ask the browser to build a JavaScript application and render HTML based on what the data that we have sent from the server. The server has to help the client devices render the final HTML so that it can just render it in the browser. So the web were mostly showing static contents. Interactions are done through links and forms, but both of them causes full page navigations. So there are not much that you can do without going to the server to request for a new page. An example of this technology of using MPA would be PHP, ASP, JSP, and they are still in use right now, but they are quite a bit different from what SvelteKit is doing. This is how the MPA and SSG sequence diagram looks like. When the client requests for a page, we first check if the client is requesting a dynamic route or a static route. If the client is requesting a dynamic route, then it goes with the MPA approach, where it first go to the database or API, get the user-specific data, and then return it to the user after it combines it with the static parts of the HTML. Whereas if the user is only requesting for a static root, usually the pages are already pre-rendered beforehand. So the server can just return that static HTML to the user. And every time the user interacts with the page, since there are no client-side scripting, it will require a new page navigation, and all this flow will be repeated again. As you can imagine, these have a few drawbacks. First of all, the full page navigation is quite inefficient. Pages are disposed of and redrawn every time. Every time you switch between pages, the browser will dispose the previous page immediately so that you can see like a white blank page while waiting for the new page from the server to arrive. User interaction options are very limited. Links and forms are probably the only ones that are supported without using JavaScript back then. It's also quite hard to reuse code because pages are authored individually. That means that if you have like common elements like headers or sidebar, they will be duplicated in these pages. And you can imagine that if you need to update one of them, you need to update all the pages that has that common element, which is quite troublesome. After a few years passed, we can see that the user's devices are getting more powerful. They can actually start doing something, and there is a need for more interactivity on the web. The biggest case would be form validation. Previously, without any client-side scripting, form validation has to be done on the server. So if the user makes a very small mistake, like for example, they didn't fill any required field, or they put in an email address but the format is slightly incorrect, nowadays we can just tell them directly in the browser that, hey, you did something wrong. But back then, since we didn't have any JavaScript, the request has to go to the server. The server say, okay, that's wrong, and then it redraw the previous page, but it couldn't save the user's data. It couldn't re-render the user's input that they have put beforehand. So the user has to manually input the forms one by one again, which you can imagine is very, very troublesome. Other than that, client-side scripting is also useful for like showing dynamic content. Think of things like a hover menu, animating elements, and JavaScript allows us to do that, but the server is still responsible for rendering the page. This is how the sequence diagram looks like now. The top part is for the first page navigation, and it's still pretty much the same as MPA. But the difference is that when we need to update only a small part of the page, we can create an asynchronous request with AJAX, or asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It's what we call fetch nowadays. Back then, we need to use a different API called XML HTTP request, and back then, we use XML for response. Nowadays, we use JSON format for our fetch responses. So with this, we can add a lot more interactivity to the page. The user only needs to go to another page when like they want almost the entirety of the page to change. But if we want to have like a hover menu, like we can just do it directly from the browser without contacting the server again. This approach already sounds better, right? But there were a few setbacks. Like in the beginning, there were like browser wars between Netscape and Internet Explorer, and they each have their own JavaScript implementation. There were no standards, so what works in IE doesn't work in Netscape, and vice versa. So libraries were developed to abstract the differences. For example, libraries like jQuery, MooTools, and JavaScript was not really designed for building complex applications. The code is very tied to the page. It's not very reusable. And due to its imperative API, it can be quite hard to maintain and debug in a very complex application. Imperative here means like you have to tell the browser like exactly which element you want to update and what action you want to add to that element. And we can see later that we don't have to use this imperative API anymore with modern JavaScript frameworks. So fast forward a few years, smartphones became popular. With it, the user expectation for interactivity has increased. They're used to native apps that are very smooth and interactive. This ushers in a new era of JavaScript frameworks, which were developed to build complex applications. So the entirety of the web app can be bootstrapped purely on the client, and communication with the server are no longer for rendering the HTML pages, but they are mainly to only get the specific data that the web app needs. So they can be communicating through APIs only. And the client-side JavaScript would be the one that is responsible for updating the page to reflect the changes. Examples of these JavaScript frameworks including Svelte, React, Vue, Angular, and so on. And it also popularized the concept of components to reuse code across the app. This kind of reuse is like quite powerful because, for example, if you have a very similar common element that has a very minor differences between pages, you don't have to create a new component every time, but you can use things like props to make it accept an input and render slightly differently. This makes JavaScript code modularization much better. This is how the sequence diagram looks like for single page applications. Left one is for the first page load and the right one is for the subsequent page loads. In the beginning, it's a bit slower. You can see that the first request to the server only returns a shell HTML, which is like a mostly blank HTML. And it also includes the framework JavaScript, which are returned to the client. The client parses the JavaScript, runs everything. It renders the shell page, which is mostly empty, right? But if the page happens to require a user-specific data, since it's not included in the initial request, the client will need to make another request to the server, get the user-specific data, and only after it receives a response from the server can it finalize the render of the first page. But consequently, like for subsequent page navigations, we don't have to go to the server to request HTML anymore. We only request for the data specifically that has changed. And the server returns the data not as HTML, but as JSON now through APIs. And so the client JavaScript is the one that is responsible for rendering the new page, which is not really replacing the previous page, but it's reusing most of the reusable components in the previous page. Think of common elements like sidebar, header. Those can be reused, and only the main part that has changed will be replaced with the new data. And this is what we call client-side routing, and it's very useful to give a very interactive user experience. So SPA is already quite good, but there are still a few drawbacks. Since JavaScript runs on the client, weaker devices might struggle to run it. They're also not SEO or search engine optimization friendly. Initial response is just an empty page, so the web crawlers are not able to go to your page and index what is inside. And JavaScript also becomes mandatory with SPA because everything is done through JavaScript. This makes your application less available. Maybe your user is in an environment with weak network connection, and that causes the JavaScript to not become available. Additionally, SPA causes the initial page load to become slower because it has to go through the intermediate step of sending the client JavaScript first from the server with the empty HTML. So now you might say, Henry, you've been complaining about all the different rendering strategies available on Earth. It sounds like every single one is bad in its own way. But maybe there is no one-size-fits-all solution after all. The truth is the web is getting more diverse, and different sites require different technologies. Nowadays, we use the web for a lot of things, like for web apps, for blogs, for corporate sites, for wiki, even for games. And so there might not be one rendering strategy that fits all these requirements. So different JavaScript frameworks approach this problem slightly differently, but they all agree on one thing, which is that we don't have to rely on just one rendering strategy. This brings us to the modern era with hybrid rendering. Now, this model is also called transitional apps. This is a term coined by Rich Harris in his talk, Have Single-Page Apps Ruin the Web? I really recommend having a watch at this talk if you haven't, because it really goes into much detail about what is wrong with SPAs and what SvelteKit is trying to do to fix the issues that SPAs have. This approach allows for a mix and match of static and dynamic content in the same app. And In SvelteKit, rendering strategies can be configured on a per route basis. So for example, some routes can be server-side rendered, or we abbreviate it as SSR. Some route can be client-side rendered, or CSR. Some routes can even be pre-rendered if it's only contains static data. Now, SvelteKit's default rendering strategy uses both SSR and CSR. It expands upon the SPA concept by introducing a server to handle some tasks. Like, by default, it is only used for the first page load because it causes the first page load to be much faster than the SPA approach. But the difference is that since JavaScript runs on both the server and the client, a step called hydration is necessary to sync the data between the SSR generated HTML and CSR generated HTML, and also to attach event listeners to your DOM elements. So after that, the subsequent page navigations are done with client-side rendering, just like an SPA. This is how the sequence diagram looks like now. The left part for the first page load, it looks very similar to the multi-page application or the static page SSG diagram that we have earlier, but there is one small difference, which is that what is returned from the server is not only the page itself, but also the framework JavaScript. The framework JavaScript is returned together with the HTML so that the browser both render the page that is already generated by the server and also run the client JavaScript, hydrating the page, making sure the data actually correct, and attaching the event listeners. But for the subsequent page loads, it enjoys the benefit that SPA have, which is like we send very little data through the network, and we only need to update a small part of the page instead of doing full page navigation every time. So when do requests go to the server in this case? The obvious part would be on the first page load of the session, but also like on subsequent server load functions, and also form actions and API routes. Now, these terms might be unfamiliar to you, and I'll go through each one of them. So first of all, SSR on the first page load. This brings us the benefit of running load functions on the server first. This means that the initial backend requests that require round trips to the server in the SPA model can be made directly from the server. The results are then sent to the client so that any fetch calls immediately resolves. This results in a big improvement in perceived performance. As we can see in our Lighthouse score, we can see mainly the largest contentful pane score will be better. It also has the SEO benefits that the search engine can easily see the content of the page without running any JavaScript. With subsequent server load functions, by default, the pages are all client-side navigated and client-side rendered after the first page load, which helps us prevent having full page navigation each time since hydration isn't free. And however, some routes can be configured to run server-only load functions, like from the layout or page.server.js or TS. These are useful for load functions that needs server secret like third-party API keys, or load functions that need to make multiple API calls so that they can be batched together in one server load function. The next case is for form actions. Form actions are used to progressively enhance forms so that they can work without JavaScript. In modern JavaScript framework, we usually use JavaScript to submit forms, but the web standard allows for forms to be submitted without using JavaScript at all, and this tries to mimic that behavior. Inside the form actions, we can add code like server-side validation, input sanitization, to make sure that the data is correct, because we cannot trust only client-side validations before committing the changes. And depending on how our app is set up, we can either call the database directly or call an internal API from these form actions. And SvelteKit's fetch makes calling internal APIs easy because it does a few extra steps like inheriting the credentials from the client. And lastly is about API routes. These routes are endpoints that declare HTTP verbs like get, post, put, delete, any verb that is used for fetch, and they are declared inside +server.js or TS files. They have a lot of use cases, but one of the most interesting use case for this is to proxy internal or any external third-party API to the client code. So traditionally, if you were to access a third-party API from your client code and they're both deployed in a different origin, you might encounter a CORS issue or cross-origin resource sharing. And by proxying those APIs in the same origin as the front-end code, which is by serving it through SvelteKit's API routes, you can fix this issue completely. You can also wrap several API calls into a single endpoint so that the client only need to make one round-trip request to the server. Now, speaking of SSR, we can also talk about pre-rendering, which is a good fit for sites that are mostly static. Since everything is static, like we can render it ahead of time, which in SvelteKit's case runs during compile time. So when you build your application, SvelteKit will try to crawl the site from the main page looking for links and try to pre-render any one of them that are explicitly marked as pre-renderable. We can also selectively pre-render only certain routes. Like, for example, this is useful if you have a blog which has, like, say, hundreds of articles. But normally, like, people only visit the latest 50 pages. So instead of having to pre-render like hundreds or thousands of pages, you can specify to only pre-render the recent ones and then ask SvelteKit to server render the old ones as usual so that you can save on the build time. And this is done with an option called pre-render auto. So with this abundance of options, you might think, which one should I choose for my project then? The answer is you can mix and match them depending on your use case. SvelteKit allows us to use different strategies for different routes. So for example, we can disable SSR if we want to build an SPA, we can disable CSR if we want to build an MPA, or we can also use pre-rendering to render only static pages and have it automatically generated for us. Even with pre-rendering, we can choose to disable CSR if we want to, if we don't want to send any JavaScript to the client at all. These all are configurable on a per route or a per route group basis. So we can combine different route groups with different rendering behavior in the same project. To illustrate the concept, I would use GitHub as an example. If you were to build a project like GitHub, we would have the marketing pages like the home page, the pricing page, the about page. These pages are mostly static. They don't contain any user-specific data, and thus they also doesn't really change that often. So we can pre-render these pages, and we can also specify CSR false so that we don't ship any additional JavaScript to the user. And the content pages is like the repo pages, the organization page, the user profile page. So for these pages, we do want the benefit of SEO. We want them to be discoverable. And we can also benefit from giving the user the fast initial load. We can also benefit from progressive enhancement. And therefore, we can use SvelteKit's default behavior. This is like the perfect example of the default behavior working well because we can get the best of both worlds. And for the internal pages, what I would call the admin pages, this would be like an internal dashboard that the GitHub employees use to configure GitHub. These pages usually require a lot of interactivity, and the users are GitHub internal employees in a controlled environment, like in their own office with good network, with powerful device. So we can be more like SPA, like more client-side rendering heavy, and SSR would be optional in this case, because these pages doesn't need to be indexed by the search engine. This is an example of how we can configure the SvelteKit project to build this kind of app. So first of all, we have the marketing root group. The word marketing here won't be part of the final URL. So for example, like the homepage would be served from github.com from the plus page.svelte in this folder. So in that case, we need to make sure to wrap the marketing word in the folder name in the parentheses so that they won't show up in the final URL. So the about and the pricing pages can also be here. In the layout.ts file in this folder, we can specify pre-render true and CSR false so that these are all pre-rendered and we don't ship any JavaScript to the client. Next one is the what I call the org or user root group, because in github.com you can go, like, for example, to /svelte.js to go to the Svelte organization. You can also go to my user profile, for example, like github.com/henrylee. So that's why like we have like double name in the root parameter. And with this example, like we can use the default behavior, which is SSR true, CSR true. We get the benefit of both worlds. And for the admin pages, for example, like the settings page or any internal pages that I'm not really familiar of, since they are like the internals of GitHub, we can serve them from, for example, from github.com/admin, or this can also be rerouted to another domain, like for example, admin.github.com. With these pages, like they're more interaction heavy, like more like an app, a single page app. So we can set SSR false in the layout.ts file. So a final note is about deploying the app. If your entire app is pre-renderable or the entirety of your app is a single page application, you can use SvelteKit's adapter called adapter static to generate static files for the entirety of your front end, so that it can be deployed to a static hosting provider like a CDN, for example. You don't need any server part at all if your app fits into this category. But if you require to render some dynamic pages, you need some code to run on the server, then you would need to deploy to platforms that support Node. And SvelteKit provides like platform-specific adapters for popular platforms like Vercel, Netlify, Cloudflare Workers. Like there are dedicated adapters for that. But if you want to roll your own Node server, you can also use the adapter node that SvelteKit provides. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching. I hope this is useful and enjoy the rest of the talks.
All right. I now know a lot of acronyms.
I know,
What they
right? It
mean.
like explains every single one of them. That was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited about acronyms. I'm also excited about multi-page applications, single-page applications, all the applications. That was a great talk, Henry. You've previously done another talk on SPAs in SvelteKit, and for me that has been a great resource recently, actually, as I'm actually working with an SPA SvelteKit application. Not something I usually do because I always go for like the full-on SvelteKit with backend and all that.
I feel like those talks are really good to go back to and like bring up just to help you figure out what kind of rendering you need, like depending on the type of app that you want. I love that.
Yeah. So from SPAs, MPAs, SSG, SSR, all the good stuff, we're gonna do a talk about developer experience using Storybook, something which I think everyone has heard about. Storybook, they've been around for a while. So how can you integrate Svelte's single file components with Storybook's API that requires multiple named exports for stories? That's the question we'll answer in this talk. Well, I won't be answering this question, but the speaker will. So let's see what we can learn.
Svelte community. I'm going to talk to you about how we did elevate the developer experience of using Storybook for Svelte. My name is Mateusz, and for the concept of this talk, just a Storybook contributor. Let's to briefly introduce what is Storybook. For me, it's a tool which enables me to have a productive workshop to develop, document, and test UI components and page in isolation. And that means I don't need to worry about running the whole application architecture to start working on them. And inside the Storybook, I can cover every possible visual edge case I'm right. The Storybook also has a very rich ecosystem. Recently, they announced an integration with beta testing framework, and that's quite exciting. Okay, let's move on. This code example shows how do you write the stories for Svelte in regular format. And I'm gonna show you a quick preview on what it produces in practice. Now, please just try to remember that in this regular format, we can see the export deport method as well as export objects for each story. Right? And since Storybook is a catalog, this highlight line helps populate the sidebar on the left. We got that, right? So, what if I told you that you can break stories using Svelte syntax? That would be awesome, right? And yes, it's possible. Thanks to this add-on, which allows us to achieve that. And to make it simple, I'm going to call it Svelte format. Now, I want to show you a difference between regular and Svelte format. On the right is the regular one, and on the left is Svelte. There is not so much difference, right? And that's what's intentional, because this add-on is supposed to adhere closer to the Storybook API. So there's less confusion, less surprise, and more consistent. In the regular format, the stories are objects, and in the Svelte format, stories are components. Still, you might wonder why we would bother to make it possible. Two reasons. Flexibility. Using the Svelte syntax language, I am no longer limited to use, for example, Svelte blocks such as if loop, if condition, or promise with await. And the second reason is that I can leverage Svelte feature, and I am talking about reactivity, binding, runes, etc. And I am no longer limited to what I want to be displayed inside the story because of the JavaScript language syntax. And about Svelte 5, recently me and Jeppe from Storybook core maintainer team did a ground refactor on the Storybook add-on to support it and fit better its paradigm. So, the challenge we encountered and the lessons we learned are the reason why I am here talking to you. So finally, let's hop to this question. How it works? Okay, so the first challenge I want to talk about is how do we communicate to Storybook which stories are in the story Svelte file. As you might remember that in the Svelte format, we don't have any export at all like in the regular one. So, how do we send the highlight crucial data so it can populate the sidebar on the left? Luckily, the solution for this case is quite easy. First, the Storybook has an interface API. So, what we need to do is to hook into it and use the parse function from the Svelte compiler module to get the AST, and it means abstract syntax tree. In practice, it's one big scale object with a lot of the syntax nodes. But it doesn't have to be scary at all. If you already had the chance to play around the Svelte 5 playground, you might already saw it, and I'm going to show you. Okay, on the left, the Svelte code format as input. Please notice that on the range pane, there's last tab called AST output, and this is what we are going to use for this particular case. It's very useful because as soon as you, for example, hover on the module property, we get the script tab highlight and its body scope. Or, for example, when we hover on the fragment, all of the stories in this code will get highlight. We can go deeper than that. For example, if I wanted to find the first story in the fragment, we can go to the second item. For example, if we want to extract the name attribute and its iterable value, we can go into the component attributes and find the attribute called name, then extract its value, which will be primary. This is nice. And this is what we are going to use for static analytics for this add-on needs. What I show with you what are basic foundational knowledge on how you can explore the Svelte AST. Back to the solution. Luckily, the Svelte maintainer created also a really nice package called a SimMainFrame, which allows us to do some really convenient working on the AST object and extract the particular nodes for our needs. Okay, time for another challenge. Very major one. What we did before, it didn't enable the Storybook to render the stories correctly. And what I am talking about is the body of the Storybook, and this is what it looks like, to remind you. So, the challenge is that the Svelte has adopted concept of the single file component, and how it affects us in practice. I'm going to show you using the Svelte file playground. In the playground, on the right pane, the second tab is called JavaScript output. And that's where we can find our compile output. Now, everything that we write in the storage Svelte file becomes one big MAM function, which is one component, and is exported by default. And that's a problem, because the Storybook engine has no idea what to do with this one. To quickly remind you, in the regular format, we defined our export, for example, the meta or the storage. And that's how we tell Storybook what to render. And this is the reason of why we have to transform the compile output. And Bit plugin API can help us with that. Thanks to Jeppe, I learned that there's really nice debugging tool which I am going to use and explain better of what is happening inside this add-on. This is how this inspector tool looks like. Let's focus on the button storage Svelte file and click on it. On the left sidebar, we can find the transform stack, and it has every plugin which show from the first input to the last transformation. We are going to focus on the Storybook add-on plugin. On the left, you can see the compile output. And on the right, there is our transformation that is happening for this file. It's like Git diff preview, quite convenient, right? So you remember that in the regular format, the export default is meta. But in the compile output is the main component function. So we have to remove this line and then replace it with meta. But where is meta? And this is where we do the heavy lifting for you behind the scenes to help you focus on writing stories, to improve the developer experience. Anyway, what happened to the meta is that we are destructoring it from the defined meta function call. And then, at the end of the transform compile output, we add the export default meta. Okay, now the story. They need to be exported to write. But where are they? We should make a good guess if we remember the concept of single file component, that they live inside the main function scope. So, the first story should be the primary. And there it is. And the second story, small, is there. But the question is that given they live inside the function scope, how do you export them? Okay, so we can see that everything that is happening in the main component function scope, everything that is happening here, I'm making a wide guess that what is happening here is related to the activity, binding, and the templating. We don't need to understand in depth what is happening here. Anyway, what we can do about this? Create runtime storage. This is a fancy name invented by Jeff to help us understand better the purpose of this function. We don't have time to explore more in depth what it does, so that's why I'm going to skip to the end of the transform output. You can notice that I'm importing the create runtime storage function, and then use it to export every storage we define in the space storage file as component. And this is how we solve this problem. I know this might take you a while to understand what is happening here, and it's quite advanced even for myself. Regardless, you might have noticed that we didn't really modify the main component function a lot. We just add more export at the end of the compile output, and all of it to break out the paradigm of Svelte, which is single file component. Now I wish I had more time to explain the rest of the transformation, but I have to move forward. Finally, let's brought to start with some takeaways. Firstly, I hope I gave you some inspiration on how you can do some AST transformation on the Svelte compile code or the input. It doesn't have to be scary at all if you have the right tools. And this is how you can improve the developer experience of your projects, and even the obstacles such as per single file component doesn't have to block you from doing it. And lastly, I want to buy some excitement because as soon as the Svelte 5 is out of the RC, I hope it's soon, then the Storybook add-on to help you browse stories in the Svelte format will be shortly ready. And by the way, you're going to have the support for the legacy API, so you can still have the stories in the old syntax because they are supposed to still work. We got your back there, and you can already try it out in the next version of this stack. So if you have the time and opportunity to try it out, please do share with us what do you think. Thank you.
So I use Storybook every day in my job. I love Storybook. Svelte CSF is probably one of the best ways to use it. It's just more intuitive when you're used to the Svelte syntax. I was not even familiar with the vtest plugin that he was using. They actually have a package called Storybook Test that you can write. It uses vtest under the hood, and you can write a play prop inside of your stories, and I write all of my tests in Storybook now. It's so simple and smooth and easy, and then that way people can even go to the Storybook site and see the tests running and passing, which is cool. I mean, it's really cool. And I will have to do like an updated talk. I know they've been amazing partners with us, and the Storybook team has been great with working with us. And when Svelte 5 comes out, I know they have things in action to get Storybook updated and Svelte CSF updated so that we can write Svelte 5 syntax in Svelte CSF and Storybook too, which is really cool.
Exciting. Like I mentioned in the chat here that I haven't really used Storybook that much with Svelte. So this is making me want to take
it
another
has come
look.
a long way, like a really long way. And it's really great to work with now.
Yeah. All right. So Brittany, do you know what talk it is?
My turn. I do. I know. I tried to start this one earlier, and then I like showed a comment by accident. I'm all over this talk today, apparently. So our next talk is all about supercharging your development workflow with SvelteKit, where James Camilleri is going to be presenting slide to the left presentations with SvelteKit and PartyKit. In this talk, James will walk us through Kitbook, an amazing tool that builds on where Finch left off. Kitbook allows you to easily document and develop components and isolations using iframes, but it goes even further by pulling in only the context you need, like styles and internationalization and SvelteKit imports, while leaving out things you don't, such as database connections. Lots more to talk about that James is going to let us know. So let's get started with it.
Let's slide to the left.
Yeah, slide to the left.
Hey Svelte Summit, super excited to be here. Although, to be honest, this is the first time I have pre-recorded the talk instead of giving it live, and it's super weird.
Also, I just spent 45 minutes recording and then realized I had the wrong mic hooked up.
Anyway, I'm James. I'm a software developer based in London, although I'm originally from Malta, and today I'll be talking to you about making slideshows in SvelteKit. This is a little hobby project of mine, and it came about because inevitably, every time I needed to give a presentation, I would spend hours, if not days, trying to get my slides together. A simple task would just spiral into hours of debugging CSS and trying to get the zoom right, so I inevitably built a tool to get all this out of the way. The entire tool is built on SvelteKit, but we're also using PartyKit for some cool WebSocket integration, and that lets us do things like synchronize the view across multiple browsers, to do things like have note screens or presentation view, or even a little remote that you can use from your phone to move the slides forward and backward. So we'll talk about that in a bit. This is all inspired by Reveal.js, which is a cool tool for making HTML-based slideshows. Reveal.js is a super cool tool, but it's quite SPA-oriented and didn't quite play nice with SvelteKit when I wanted to get some of the more advanced functionality to work. Today we're going to talk about making a slide deck using the tool, the templating system that you can use to give every slide just the right look, how we leverage Svelte transitions, and also how we make some pretty cool animated backdrops, and then finally how we use PartyKit to get the remote control and presenter view working. The entire crux of the application is just a list of slides. I didn't want to write out the HTML for every slide because that could get a bit boilerplatey. And while Markdown is super cool for easily getting your text out, it gets a bit tricky when you want to do anything more complicated with it. So a simple array of slide objects seemed like the best way to go. This is in fact the slide list for the current presentation we're going through. There's templates that you can define for each slide, and all the content you need to show in the slide is passed through as a prop. You can also add notes to individual slides, and that'll show up in the notes view or the presenter view or on your phone if you're using the mobile clicker, and that's super handy for reminding yourself what you're supposed to be saying. There's also a slide resolver function, and what that does is pick the most appropriate slide for the given content. I'll show you how that works in a bit. There's markdown processing, and we can also embed things like iframes, images, and videos. Code highlighting is also built in with Shiki. That's pretty handy, and a nifty thing we're doing here is importing a bit of source code as a raw string using Vite's raw parameter. The app is using URL-based state, so the current slide index is stored in the URL, and that is pushed through to the current route. That is in turn pushed through to the slide view component, whose job is remarkably displaying the slide. So with that index, the slide view component will pull out the appropriate slide information from the canonical slide list, and then use the resolver function to figure out which template it's going to display. This is an example of a simple resolver. It's basically a function with a bunch of if statements in it. So each slide goes into the resolver function, and using the properties available on that slide, you can figure out what the most appropriate template to show is. So in this case, if we have a slide with a code key, we're going to obviously pick the code template. In the case of slides that only have an H1 or an H2 and no other content, we're going to display them as a center title. And you can add as many variations and as many templates as you want in here. And there's always a fallback default template if nothing quite fits the bill. Here's an example of a super simple template. It is in fact the code template that is used to render all the code samples. So the one you're looking at now. Again, everything comes in as a prop, and we're using Shiki for the actual highlighting. The HTML itself is super simple. It's just the title and the injected formatted code. Talked about Markdown previously. Markdown is great, and we're using the Svelte Markdown package to automatically render Markdown in our titles and in our main content. So that's, again, super simple template, and it just works. The slide view component sets up some global styles and then uses the slide index to pull out the current slide from the canonical list of slides, and then passes that through to the template resolver to actually pull out the slide component. So super simple stuff. You'll notice we're using the new Svelte 5 syntax for rendering variable components. So rather than using the old Svelte :component syntax, it's just actually putting the variable in as a live component. You'll also notice that we're keying the slide index, and that means that every time the slide index changes, shifting from one to the other, we get an automatic transition out of the box. Transitions themselves are super simple to set up. It's just a matter of grabbing the existing Svelte transitions and picking the ones you want to use, or writing your own in the traditional Svelte manner if you're so inclined. Config is done through this function that actually receives the current directions. You can have different transitions for whether a slideshow is moving forward or back, and that lets us decide if we're going to slide left or right in this case. And now for some fun stuff, animated backdrops, because we're over subtle gradients. Since everything in the slide is a Svelte component, we can make some pretty nifty animated backdrops. This, for example, is made entirely out of animated SVGs, and this is what you get when you first download the template. This is a slightly more complex one, and this is made with Svelte. This, by the way, is the most meta part of the presentation. This is a slideshow about Svelte, built in Svelte, embedded in a slideshow about slideshows in Svelte, built in Svelte. Shout out to the Svelte team for building such a nifty library. The previous example and the backdrop for the current slideshow are all built in Svelte, so that's really cool. And speaking of background components, this is the background component for the current slideshow. You'll see we're using a Svelte canvas over here. And every background receives the props for the current slide. So you can do things based on the current slide content in your background, such as setting it to dark mode. We're using Svelte 5 encapsulated state over here. So that's creating a little sub-function that always returns a reactive number dictating the direction the slideshow is moving. And we're also using something interesting here, which is a seeded random number generator. So the idea is you create a random number generator based on a particular seed, which in this case is a concatenation of the current slide index, the title, and some content. And what this means is that for that seed, the random number generator will always return the same sequence of random numbers, meaning it's random but predictable. And I'll tell you why this is important in a bit. The actual animation itself is just a lovely Svelte component that does all the cool stuff in the background. So here's an example of Svelte 5 encapsulated states, which I'm just throwing out for those of you who are still warming up to the new syntax. Bit of a gotcha. You should always pass reactive state around as some sort of getter, because you want that to be recalculated on the fly every time the state is being accessed. Also, we've got an example of the effect.pre rune being used here. This is important. We want to calculate the direction, which way the slide is moving before the DOM actually updates. Otherwise, we get into a scenario where we have two updates, one animation going one way and the other animation going the other. So, predictable randomness. Why? Why not just use math.random? Well, the main reason is that it allows us to have a repeatable sequence of events. So if you look at the location of the orange cubes in the backdrop, those are random, yet predictably so. If I move to the next slide and then move back, the cubes are in the same place. So this means that if I'm syncing my presentation across all of my audience's devices, everyone's backdrop will look the same. If people access the page at random, they're always going to have the same position of things. Animations that require some element of randomness will have that random effect, but also replay consistently every time. So this allows us to synchronize that randomness across multiple devices. This is how we get these seeded pseudo-random numbers. I'm not going to lie, this code is completely beyond me. It's doing some funky maths, which, yeah, I'm not cut out for. So thanks to Bryce, if I'm pronouncing that right, probably not. Thank you for your contribution to the internet, because I have no idea how this works, but it does. Onto the actual Svelte animation, there's a lot going on here, so I'm going to skim through most of it and kind of stop on the interesting bits. We're using tween stores to store the values that need to be transitioned. So in this case, it's the intensity of the two lights on the backdrop. There's one on the top right, one on the bottom left. And we're using the from store helper, and that converts that into new Svelte 5 derived state. Got an effect over here that triggers whenever dark mode changes, and that's going to change the opacity of the lights according to if dark mode is active or not. This is the main workhorse of the entire animated backdrop. It's a large chunk of state that's holding an array of blocks. Each block is a piece of Svelte reactive state that's encapsulated in the class, and that is holding information about the position of each cube, its rotation, its color, and I'll show you how that works in a bit. And again, as mentioned previously, we're using state getters to return the latest value of any reactive state to make sure all the cubes are in sync. So we're just using an iffy here to generate this first block of state once. Could have pulled that into a separate function, but this seemed quicker. And here we're using another effect to pick 3 random cubes to highlight. Again, as discussed previously, we're using the seeded random generator, so those cubes are going to be the same for everyone viewing the slides and always the same when you move from one slide to the other. As in, when you move forward and back, your cubes will be highlighted in the same place they were before, as opposed to the same cubes being highlighted for every single slide. And here we're actually just updating our block state. We've got a rotate function and a set color function, and that's going to trigger the highlights and the rotation. These are the lights mentioned before. And here we're using a handy 3JS tool called an instance mesh. Now what an instant mesh is, so an instant mesh is a tool for displaying large numbers of the same geometry. It saves on rendering time and improves performance by basically grabbing the same object, cloning it multiple times, and then adjusting transformations and colors on it. So in this case, we've got this single rounded box geometry, and that's being replicated for each of our block states. And each block has its own unique reactive position, rotation, and color. Finally, we're also adding additional lights to any of the cubes that are highlighted. So the 3 orange cubes in the backdrops, you'll see just around here, they've got this little glow emanating from them. That's actually a point light within the cube itself, and that is only being rendered if the cube is highlighted. This is important to note because once you get more than 5-6 lights in a 3JS scene, performance slows to an absolute crawl. So we're selectively turning lights on and off according to which cubes are highlighted. This is the Svelte 5 reactive class. Again, it's pretty big and it's one of the largest things I've written with the new syntax, so there's probably stuff that's done awfully. Please let me know if there's better ways to do this. Here are all our tween stores. We're storing the rotation of each cube, the position, because our highlighted cubes are kind of pushed out forward from the backdrop, saturation and lightness for the color, and the intensity of the lights in the highlighted cubes. Lots of reactive state here, lots of derived state with the from store helper, and this is just derived state to create a color string that gets fed into Three.js. We're using the current direction of the transition to deduce how we should delay the cubes rotating. So if we're moving forward, we need to start our animation from the left to the right, and if we're moving backwards, we need to start our animation from the right to the left. So if you look at the backdrop here, we've got transitions one way and transitions the other way. So that's our derived state. And these accessors over here will allow us to constantly retrieve the latest version of each cube state. In this case, the position, rotation, color, and the intensity if they're a glowing light. There's also the option to extrude cubes, set the color, and actually adjust their rotation. Three.js uses radians, which is a bit of a head scratcher if you don't know. Lots of weird jank until I figured that out. Also, fun side note, so the random number generator, again, predictable numbers in the same order, which means if you don't call it the same number of times, your sequence of numbers is off. And I've basically accidentally recreated a React hook. So if you are implementing something like this, obviously it's a single sequence of numbers that is always going to be the same. You have to call the function the same number of times each render if you want those numbers to be predictable. Anyway, that's our Svelte 5 reactive class. So next fun thing, we're going to talk about the remote control functionality. So how we're going to synchronize state across multiple applications with WebSockets and PartyKit. What is PartyKit, I hear you ask? PartyKit is this cool serverless library. It's built on Cloudflare's durable objects. So lots of info on Cloudflare's page if you want to learn more about durable objects. But the idea is that it allows multiple serverless applications to share the same state. So there's a single piece of fixed state, and multiple applications, despite being serverless, can hook up to that state. You can access the shared state through PartyKit via HTTP requests, or in our case, WebSockets. This is the basic architecture of how we're sharing that state across instances of the app. We've got our host application here. And what that's going to do is generate an ID, which is the room ID for PartyKit. That is going to be used as the central address for all the clients to connect to. So the host will generate a new PartyKit room, and PartyKit will store the information. In this case, the key piece of information we need is the current slide. So that is stored as a piece of shared state in Cloudflare's durable objects. Any other client that connects to the same ID is going to be pushed through to that same room, and they can retrieve the latest value of the current slide from there. So anytime the host value, the host application pushes a new current slide, that current slide is automatically reflected via WebSocket updates to all the listening apps. And the same functionality can be used for view-only slides, for using a remote control, for a presenter view. It's just WebSockets all the way down. There's also the problem of authentication, in that we need to be sure that clients in view-only mode don't suddenly have access to your presentation, because the last thing you want when you're giving a big presentation is some guy in the back row on his phone flipping your slides for you as you're trying to talk. So this is solved in a super low-tech way. Do not repeat this kind of authentication to store your client's credit card details, but essentially what we're using is a shared secret. So Upon initially creating a session, the host remote is going to generate a secret. That secret is going to be passed into PartyKit and used to authenticate incoming requests. Any new clients connecting will provide that secret. If the secret is available, they will be allowed to push state. If not, they can only draw state from the shared store. So in this case, if, for example, we're sharing a public link to access slides, the link will only include the shared ID, but not the secret, which means that any client trying to push state will be barred because they don't have that little piece of code that's going to add them to a list of allowed clients. On the other hand, if we're opening presenter view or adding a remote link, we're going to pass the secret along as a query parameter. That query parameter is going to be picked up by the client and passed on in the initial request. Once that initial request is made, the code within PartyKit is going to remember which users or which clients are authenticated and which are not. Simple, no fuss, not very secure. Again, do not implement this for anything serious, but perfectly fine for moving slides back and forth. Okay, it's demo time. I'm going to show you how this works in practice. So let's get out of full screen mode. And you can see that we've got our current slide here in the URL. That's slide 28. First thing I'm going to do is hit P to bring up my presenter view. And you can see that, actually I'm going to do it again, watch the URL as that happens. So you're going to see we're going to open a new tab and we've got the secret appended there at the back. So we now have the current slide ID, the current presentation ID over here, followed by the current slide. And you can see that our slides now match up. If I move backwards on the main slide, my presenter view will also update. If I move forward on the presenter view, my main slides will also update. Notice again, back to that controlled randomness, you can see that the random background matches in all versions of our slide. We've also got this handy little notes view over here. And if we go back to the main slide, we can also trigger a remote control view. So by hitting R, I'm going to bring up a shareable QR code. Again, current slide listed over here, the presentation ID over here, and the secret over here. This is pre-recorded, so you can't do any damage once this is out because I'll be in bed. Gonna grab our phone, simple QR code reader, pick that up. And you can see here we've got slide view, and that's bringing up my notes and buttons to move forward and backward. And that is again all working live over WebSockets, and all of these states are now synchronized. So if I pop back to my presenter view, you can see that that's also synchronizing in the same way. So that's handy. Last minute addition to the app was a notes view. So that again, same thing, rather than showing the entire presenter mode, it just shows the notes. Notes is a read-only, an example of a read-only route on your app. So I can't actually change what slide is visible from this page. But if I go back here and flip a slide back and go back to the notes page, you'll see that that's updated with my notes for slide 27. So yeah, that is PartyKit and live slide synchronization. That's it for the demo. I'll now dive into how the PartyKit connection and server is actually set up. And it's pretty simple. So if we look here, this is just a single class. We're using a couple of private fields to store important state. So the secret, which we're going to use to authenticate clients against, a set storing all the authorized client IDs, the current slide, which is really the most important piece of state that's going to be stored, and we're also storing the total slides just so no client accidentally pushes the presentation past the last slide. The onConnect function is called naturally once any client tries to connect to the server. We're going to try and pull out the secret and the total slides from the URL, just from the query parameters. And if the secret is present, we're going to add them to our authenticated list. And if it's the case that it's the first time we're receiving a secret, we're going to make the assumption that this is the initial host setting up the session and use that as a canonical secret to check against. Any clients with a secret are added to our authorized set. And once a client is added, we're going to notify any other parties connected that a new client has been added. This realistically is currently just used so that once you open a remote QR code, once your phone connects, it'll automatically dismiss the QR code, which is just handy to find out that a connection has actually been made. Other than that, whether a client has a secret or not, anytime something's connected, we're going to propagate the latest slide number. And that means that if you connect from the wrong URL, once you connect and receive that server state, you're automatically going to be updated to the correct, most current version of the slides. The onMessage function is called for every message that's received. First thing we're going to do is block any unauthorized client. So if the ID of the client making the message is not in our list of authorized IDs, we're just going to ignore anything they try and do. Whereas if not, we're going to parse the slide from the payload they've sent, sanitize it to make sure they've not accidentally pushed us before the beginning or after the end, and then broadcast this new data to every single connected client. So that way I can push state updates from the main slides, I can push state updates from the remote. The latest version on every message is going to be propagated to all connected clients. And that's all done in maybe 40 lines of code, which is pretty impressive given you have instant real-time shared state via WebSocket in a serverless environment. So well done, PartyKit. Looking at the implementation from the remote side, i.e. The actual application on the browser, class is slightly chunkier here, but it's doing much of the same thing, connecting to this shared state. Again, I'm going to skim through the less interesting code, storing and restoring some of the session parameters in local storage, and that's just handy. So if I need to refresh my core slideshow for any particular reason, it'll automatically set up in the same connection, and I won't need to reconnect all of my associated clients. This is how we'd initially set up our first session, just a random UUID for a presentation in secret. And this is the key function that's actually initializing the whole shared session. So the meat of it is over here. So this PartySocket function, the PartySocket class, is actually going to create a live WebSocket connection to PartyKit. We're pulling out the host, which is public and shareable, setting a particular ID for the room, and this ID is what other clients are going to use to connect to ensure they're sharing the same state. Secret and total number of slides are passed through on a query parameter. The rest of it is just plain old WebSocket. So we're adding an onOpen function, which will register various handlers once a WebSocket has been constructed. And we're registering an onMessage handler, which will update the in-memory store of our current slide once a message is received. So anytime that WebSocket state is being propagated down, this onMessage function will trigger and update our local state. As mentioned before, we're also using status updates to hide the QR code once the device is connected. So that function is called from the host. We have a similar function in the same class, which is going to be called from the client. In this case, again, very much the same thing. We're passing a presentation ID, and we're passing a secret. The secret, however, is optional. So if we don't pass a secret through, a connection will still be made. We just won't have write access to change slides or any other updates. Exact same functionality where we're creating a new party socket, sending the PartyKit host, presentation ID, and secret if applicable. The onOpen and onMessage are doing essentially the same thing, just on the client side. And that's it for me. So we've been over how you can knock a slideshow together in Svelte, how you can create animated backdrops and fancy transitions, and how we can use shared state to synchronize multiple slideshows across multiple devices. Slides are obviously available online. This entire slideshow was done from the Netlify hosted presentation. You can access them here. Source code for the slides is here. And the source code for the template, which you can clone yourself and use to make your own presentations, is here. That's pretty much it, folks. Feel free to get in touch. I have an email address. You can find me on GitHub under James Camilleri. I think I'm James Camilleri on Discord and occasionally float around the Svelte Discord server, so you can ping me there if there's anything you'd like to know. Although I am notoriously bad at any sort of social media. So terrifyingly, sending me an email might be your best bet. And I feel old saying that. I'm also on the Svelte Society London WhatsApp group. So if you're local, shoot a message there and come meet us at our next Svelte meetup. Thanks for listening and hope you enjoyed Svelte Summit. That's it.
We're back.
We're back. I want to apologize to James and to everyone for getting the description wrong. I'm so sorry about that. This is why you need to prepare a little more than I did today. So apologies, but
happens to everyone.
That was a wonderful talk. That was really cool to see all of that. And I mean, let's just use that in the future for all of our
Yeah. I mean,
why do we need anything else?
Yeah, instead of all these like weird clickers and all this weird stuff when you're doing a live talk, you should just use this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well.
Yeah. And Dominic posted a little Easter egg about the Svelte community in the chat while that was going on. I just wanted to put this up here. So to verify you're not an LLM, please confirm if Rich Harris holds an ice cream cone in his Twitter picture. It is in fact not an ice cream cone. It is a pizza cone for everyone out there that wants to know that in the future and prove you're not an LLM.
Yeah, it does look like some kind of ice cream cone.
It
or
does.
something, but it isn't. It isn't.
I didn't even know a pizza cone was a thing before I knew that.
Yeah, same. We actually got them here for a short while, and then the place shut down. I don't think it did very well. So.
Oh man.
Yeah. Oh. Anyway, from talk about slideception and clickers and all that stuff, let's head on over to the next talk. So next up we have lessons learned from building a mobile app with Tauri and SvelteKit. Ooh, exciting.
I've heard so many good things about Tauri, so I'm excited to see this one as well.
Yeah, here we go.
Hi, I'm Thilo, and I'm a software engineer at Impeers Technologies.
And I'm Daniel. I'm also a software engineer at Impeers. Today, we would like to show you what we learned when building a mobile application for iOS and Android using SvelteKit in the front end. Let's go. One of the products we are working on at Impeers Technologies is a mobile app called Unimi that allows users to manage their digital identities. The Identity Wallet is completely free and open source and follows standard protocols to support the upcoming eIDAS 2.0 regulations. For our other products, libraries, and services, we chose the Rust language for its stability, performance, and security features, and so we asked ourselves if we can also use it for our mobile application. Of course, we're also very big fans of using Svelte on the front end, so we were looking for a solution that lets us get the most out of our small dev team. That's how we came across the Tauri framework. It allows creating mobile apps with a Rust core that binds to iOS and Android system APIs. The frontend can be built using any web frontend framework as long as it produces HTML, CSS, and JavaScript outputs. Perfect! It also has strong security concepts and compiles to significantly smaller app sizes compared to other frameworks, since it relies on the system-native web view instead of bundling an entire Node runtime into the app. Let's have a closer look at the differences to a classical web application.
Since Tauri's Rust core does not expose an HTTP API, we can also not make use of the fetch API. But Tauri offers an invoke API instead, which works in a similar way. Tauri also does not have a higher level concept of message formats or a predefined abstraction to sync application state across the front end and the back end. So the question is, can we apply patterns that already work well for web apps to a mobile app as well? You have to be aware that a user can close a mobile app at all times, and this should not lead to errors or unexpected behavior in your app. In order to perform predictable state updates and keep state management complexity low, we applied the Redux pattern. Let me show you how. We are wrapping a single invoke inside a dispatch function that can be called anywhere in the front end. In the Rust backend, we then run reducers that apply the business logic to update the application state. On a successful state update, the backend emits an event containing the new state back to the front end. On the front end, we then use a Tauri event listener to listen for those events and set them to a writable store. Now, every page can subscribe to that store and will have access to the entire application state to construct a view. That nicely decouples the front end from the back end. While applying the Redux pattern does sound like a possible performance issue at first, please keep in mind that we are now communicating over a network, and thus have near zero latency through inter-process communication inside the app. However, the Redux pattern still doesn't scale well, since the application state grows over time when more and more features are added to the app. You can consider breaking the application state into smaller feature states that are updated individually, or even move towards a different architecture, such as querying the backend only for the data that is required by the current view. This would introduce a separate frontend state from the backend state, which can also introduce other complexity. Tauri is less opinionated on this than you might like. You can do whatever suits your app.
Lesson 2, we're not running a full-stack SvelteKit app inside Tauri. So let's have a quick look at Tauri's architecture again. So SvelteKit runs inside of WebView, and then it can communicate with the Rust backend. But nowhere here do we see a Node.js server. And a Node server is what you would need if you wanted to use SvelteKit's full-stack features. And that's the reason why we have to use adapter static. And it's really crucial to understand the limitations of adapter static. So let's have a quick look at two settings. So the Tauri documentation recommends these two settings. Now the first setting, pre-render true, means that adapter static will generate an HTML page for every known route. And the index.html file is what Tauri uses as an entry point to render the SvelteKit app inside the web view. So this means that the SvelteKit app that we're building for Tauri is an SPA, a single page app. Let's have a quick look at the Unimi codebase. Since we do not have a Node server, we cannot use any server-side features of SvelteKit. That's also the reason why you won't find any +page.server.ts or +layout.server.ts files in our codebase. This unfortunately also means that we cannot use SvelteKit form actions. So when you write forms in your Tauri app, you have to make sure that you handle your forms client-side only. While we can't use server-side load functions, we can use load functions inside plus layout.ts or plus page.ts files, because these load functions run on page transitions client-side. Rather than calling fetch in a Tauri app, you should use invoke. Invoke is very similar to fetch. It can call a Rust command on the backend, and you can add some options, and it will return some data into your load function, which you can pass on to the page that you're rendering. Lesson 3. Console log and logging are your best friends when you're debugging a Tauri app. You might know that with Tauri you can not only develop mobile apps, but you can also develop desktop apps. And when we run Tauri in dev mode, then we run the desktop app. So what you see here is a web view on macOS, and this web view is powered by Safari. So even though it's a web view, we can right-click and choose Inspect Element. And what we see here are indeed the Safari DevTools, but it's a stripped-down version of the DevTools that is missing some crucial features. For example, it does not include the responsive design mode. Now, a typical debug situation that we often encounter in our Tauri app is that something does not render properly on a page, and we need to check what is going on. In our app, we load data mostly from Svelte stores, and then we want to see what will be rendered just before it is rendered. Let's assume that the route that renders a credential has a bug, and we want to see the credential data before it's being rendered. This is the corresponding SvelteKit route, and one thing we can do is we can just use Svelte's debug directive and render the credential. So when we go back and then navigate again on the credential route, we can look here at the variable, and we just need to look for the credential, and then we can inspect the credential. Another thing we can do is we can use reactive statements and do a console dir. So in this case, this statement will be run just before the page is re-rendered. This time we need to make sure we're looking at the console tab in the Safari DevTools. We click the route again, and then we see the console dir down there, and we can inspect the credential data that we render on the page. To wrap up this lesson, I would like to mention that Tauri comes with an optional logger. This plugin allows you to log from the front end to the terminal, and thereby get consolidated logs from both the Rust backend and from the front end in your terminal. Our final lesson for today is that delivering cross-platform mobile apps as a small team is incredibly hard. We are only 8 colleagues at Impeers Technologies, so when we heard that Tauri is combining 2 technologies that we know, web views and Rust, into mobile apps, we were really excited. Tauri is not the only player in the space of developing mobile apps in a non-native way. There are many others, but as far as we know, Tauri is only one of 2 that fully embrace web views to deliver mobile apps. We currently use Tailwind and Svelte transitions, but we have to admit that our Tauri app is far from looking native, because it's incredibly difficult to create a native look and feel with a web app. You all know it. But the web API in browsers keeps improving. For example, Safari 18 has just rolled out view transitions. And that's why we're optimistic that with Tauri, we will eventually be able to deliver a near-native user experience. Talking about Tauri, we would like to give the Tauri team a big shout out. They have just released version 2, which added support for mobile apps. So head on over to the Tauri website and give it a try, and of course only in combination with SvelteKit.
We will continue our exciting journey using this technology stack and see where it takes us. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. Bye!
What an interesting talk.
Yeah. It was very interesting to see how they all kind of work together.
Yeah, I went to a workshop on Tauri in Budapest for JSConf earlier this year, and it was pretty interesting. I haven't found like a real use case for it yet, but definitely something I'll keep in mind. I'm happy
Awesome.
these guys found a use case for us, though.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe it's for building native apps, so maybe we can do more of that. All
Yeah.
right. So up next, we have one of our fellow friends, ambassadors in the Svelte community, Scott Tolinski, giving a fantastic talk on a topic that's all about creating fast and resilient native feeling apps called Local First Svelte. Local First is about writing software that feels native. In this talk, he'll share real code to cover the spectrum of types of local first apps built with Svelte 5 and SvelteKit. So take it away, Scott.
Quick, I have a new course on Svelte 5 Basics out now at Syntax FM on YouTube. Give it a watch. We cover everything you need to know if you are new to Svelte 5 or Svelte. Hey, what's up? My name is Scott Tolinski, and today I'm going to be talking about local first software within Svelte. And this is going to be how you can make native feeling apps written in web tech. There's going to be a lot here. We're going to show some code. We're going to talk techniques. We're going to talk very broad, but also very local to Svelte. So once again, my name is Scott Tolinski. I am the co-host of the Syntax podcast. If you need a web development podcast in your life, well, check out Syntax at syntax.fm. I'm also an executive producer over at Sentry, where I get to work on Syntax full-time. You can find me at any of these places, syntax.fm, tolin.ski, or on any of the socials at stolinski. I think this question often gets asked. People hear the term and they might see it on Twitter, local first. It's a buzzword right now, right? And let me tell you, I have some cool stuff to show. But what about the term local first? The term local first, one of the quintessential blog posts here from inkandswitch.com has 7 ideals, and this is like really what true local first is all about. 1, no spinners, right? Your work is there at your fingertips. When you open up an application, it's not having to wait for the network request to be available. Even if that's your data, that data is on device, that application is working and ready, you can just get to work. There's nothing worse than maybe like opening up a note-taking app and having this idea in your head, and you're just waiting and seeing that spinner. Maybe your connection's not good. You're waiting for something to happen so you can get this out. Another one is your work is not trapped on one device, meaning that I can take my work that I'm doing from my phone to the tablet to my computer, right? Nice and easy, something that I tend to do often myself. Next is that the network is optional, as in if the network itself might even have bad conditions or less favorable conditions, or, even just no network at all. Now, not all applications need this type of functionality, but when they do, it's really nice. I'm a snowboarder. I go on the mountains, and half the mountains in Colorado do not have good network conditions. So if I go on my phone, I'm on the chairlift, and I need to do something, and I don't have an ability to use this thing offline, it can be really frustrating. 4, seamless collaboration with your colleagues. Have you ever made a grocery list? Maybe you're with your spouse or partner at a grocery store. You both have a shared list. You're on different sides of the store. My wife and I do this all the time, where we're constantly adding things to each other's shopping list so we can grab it. And that way we're not sending text messages back and forth, and we can check off what we're picking up. So seamless collaboration, something like Figma, something like Notion, any of these multiplayer apps. Number 5 is the long now, which means that this thing will exist long into the future because it's built on technical things that don't require a third party out there to be working. If you've ever played a video game when they shut their servers down and then that video game is completely useless, that's the problem this is trying to solve. 6, security and privacy by default, meaning that because everything is local on your device, that is your information. If it does go into the cloud, they expect it to be encrypted. 7, you retain ultimate ownership and control, meaning you own your data, you can take it with you, download it in a format that you can use later. Sounds pretty ideal, right? But practically, though, you're going to do all that stuff in every app. Not every app needs those features anyways. And I think there's a lot of cool things about working with local data in the context of maybe a local first app that you don't need to have all that stuff to be able to take advantage of. So practically, in my mind, and this is just a wide view of this, a practical application of this very well may just have local data and it has work offline. Granted that those don't follow the ideals of the idea of local first. However, if it has local data and works offline, that to me is a huge win for many of these applications. If you've ever used something like Linear or Superhuman, you know how fast these apps can be. So why local data? Well, that's exactly it. One, it's fast as hell. This stuff absolutely cooks. You don't need things like optimistic UI, because when you hit a button and it saves it to the database, it saves it to the database. You don't need to fake save it to the database, right? And because of that, it feels native. It feels like a real app on your phone. The latency is so gone that you don't have to worry about how it feels. For your users, it feels good, right? That's a big thing about web apps, especially ones that aren't properly using these features to be fast. Maybe they're not even doing optimistic UI. You click something, you wait even like 300 milliseconds, right? Too long. 3, it can work on any network condition. Like I mentioned, spotty network, these types of things are going to make the apps feel a lot better for users. So that's what it means for a user. But what does it mean for developers? For developers, it means you're doing a lot more client-side JavaScript, specifically because if you rely on the server for everything, when that server isn't there, yeah, you can use a service worker to cache some things. But when that server isn't there, the application should still be able to work. So that means you end up writing a lot more client-side JavaScript, which isn't necessarily a problem when it feels this fast. And that also means that these applications are definitely better suited for things that are an app rather than a marketing site, right? Because we don't necessarily need that SEO in the same way. 2, on-client database technology. Typically, this could be something like an IndexedDB, which is kind of the easiest option. There are people putting Postgres via WASM in the browser. There's people doing SQLite in the browser, but you can get by doing a lot with just IndexedDB. 3, the last one here, is possibly if this data needs to be persisted somewhere to a database, is like a network sync. So I hit a button, it saves it to my local database in the background, just doing a sync. And in fact, let's dive into that, because the sync server might do a few things. The sync server might even handle conflict resolution, right? Perhaps I hit a button and you hit a button, or we type on the same line. How does the application and database respond to that conflict? Not every app needs that. Depends on, how often data is being updated and by whom. But there's also pushing, pulling, and polling. You might push information up to your persisted server. You might pull information from your persisted server in the background, or you might have a polling process that says, do we need new data? Do we need new data? At an interval. But you might also even have like server sent events to trigger a poll. So there's a lot of different things here. And lastly, persisting to a database. Whatever that database technology may be, you need to have a way to persist it to a database. So to break it down, you may often see diagrams like this. And I'm not picking on PowerSync right here. PowerSync is a good technology, but oftentimes you go to any of these local first service sites and they have these crazy diagrams and they're often way too overdone. And I want to simplify. Here's the most simplified version of this type of thing. So in a typical website, this is very simplified here. You have a client, it's the website, it's the app, whatever. It requests information from the server. That server may grab it from a database. Then that server sends it back to the client, renders it, right? That's all happening in kind of a linear process. This, right? Now, with a local first app, it might look something a little bit more like this. You have your client, and that client is first grabbing information from the local database. The first thing it does is check to see if that information's in the local database. Most times after the initial load, it's going to be there and it's going to load instantly. It's also going to kick off a background process that's going to sync. It's going to hit the remote server. It's going to find out what the data that it needs to make the local database complete with up-to-date information, if there is any. And it's going to hit that remote database. It's going to grab what it needs, and it's going to send that information along the back end, and it's going to save it into the local database and update the UI. That whole process can be that fast if, of course, you're sending just the patch messages and things like that. Maybe the initial data load, if you have a lot of data, might be kind of heavy. But because the information is coming in from that client database, that local database first and foremost, that page load is like that. There is nothing stopping this application from loading except from local JavaScript, which, of course, you can cache pretty hard as well. So what does it mean for SvelteKit devs specifically? Because here we are at Svelte Summit, and I want to talk about Svelte stuff. So for SvelteKit developers, it means that you end up not using server actions that much, because you can imagine in a world where you're saving to a local database on the client from the client, there's not a lot of reason to use a server action to store a database. Really what happens is you're saving it to that cache, and then there's a sync process that's being triggered from the client, and then that sends it to the server. Now, that doesn't mean you won't use server endpoints at all in SvelteKit. You can actually host your syncing server inside of the SvelteKit app yourself. I'll show you an example of that later, but you can just have an API endpoint to receive either that push-pull or whatever that sync server may look like, right? And largely client-side rendered websites or pre-rendered websites. Now we might have pre-rendered sites for marketing pages or a pre-rendered shell, but we oftentimes are going to be working with client-side data, as I mentioned before. You also can't rely on data from the server for that initial load. So that initial load, it could be happening in a load.ts, but it's probably not going to be happening in a server.load.ts as much, right? Because we want to check first and foremost if that data is available from the client before we try to load anything from the server, right? So that data coming in from the server is often happening from a sync process and not from a data loader. 5, global stores. Because of the sites are client-side renders, we don't have to worry about some of the pitfalls of global stores in a server context, server rendered context. That means we can have a global store and not have to worry about things like context or having insecure data, perhaps because that store is being used in a server side. If your templates are all being rendered only on the client, that global store is just a client store, if you think about it. And then 6, you're often using a service worker for offline support and caching. So let's get into the libraries and techniques here, because it's not an all or nothing bucket, and there's different ways you can do this. In fact, we have applications that are local only. And local only means that the data does not persist to another database. There's also a local cache and a manual sync where you actually have to write that sync process and what's happening on the server. And then there's also a full takeover, like you're using their whole system and it kind of does it all behind the scenes in a way most of the time. I'm going to go in deep on some of these. So local only. Oftentimes what you're using is IndexedDB. Now, I tend to use something called Dexy.js, and this just makes working with IndexedDB a little bit easier, kind of like ORM-ish. And it's really nice and easy because, you know what, you can just pop into Dexy, create a database, and save it right from your Svelte store. And sometimes you're using stores to sync, deserialize, or serialize the data. And I'm going to show you a couple of apps that we built. For one, we built a desktop application in Tauri for syntax, and it's pretty amazing. This thing rips, and I'll show you right now. So the syntax production assistant, as this thing runs, we have a Svelte custom data store. And you'll see here that every time we do a save of anything, right? Like we hit a save, we want to save some data. The first thing we do is we get the current data from the local DB, and we get the updated data. We merge them together, and then we put it into the local DB, and then we run the sync function. The sync function really just updates our client store because we have a state value here that is then made available to the user. So basically, anytime we save anything, we're just merging the data into the local database and putting it into a Svelte store. Now, this looks like it might be several things if you're used to working with a remote database, but when you're working with a local database, saving to IndexedDB takes infinitesimally small amount of time for the most part, to the point where I can save on every keystroke. And I'm going to show you another app that I built. I won't show the code here, but it's largely the same. And this is an invoice app that I built. And this is saving everything directly in IndexedDB itself. In fact, let me even pop this open here in application. IndexedDB invoices, and here's my invoice data right here. This is another SvelteKit app that actually saves information on every keystroke. So if I'm coming in here and I want to change this, I can instantly hit refresh, and you can see that the application is persisting this information because, again, I'm saving this on every single keystroke. This app is publicly available on my GitHub if you want to check out how I did this, but it's really just SvelteKit and Dexy. Those are the two technologies that we use for this, nothing else. So let's talk about maybe a little bit more intense version of this. Like, what does that look like? And this one is more intense only because you have to do a lot more work, but it ends up being a lot more full-featured in the end. So for instance, you might have a local cache that you're saving and updating to. And like I mentioned, in the background, a sync might be happening. I change the data, it pushes that data up in the background. Or perhaps data was changed somewhere else, there's a server sent event, it triggers a pull on the client side. And there you have the push-pull sync system that I talked about. The reason why this gets complex is that oftentimes you're working with more things than just, oh, I made a change, let's push it up. What you're dealing with is patch messages. So something like Replicache does this, and it does this really well, but it is a lot of work. I'm going to tell you that right now. Because when you have a Replicache system, you push and pull, but what you're pushing and pulling and saving into your database is just chunks, tiny little chunks, patch messages. And it's up to you, the developer, to understand those patch messages, to parse them, to know what version your database is at, and know if the patch message coming in is from a version that is newer than the one on the server. That means you have to keep track of versioning yourself. And there's all sorts of version strategies, whether you're versioning the table itself or versioning an individual row, or it's actually more work than you may expect. But for that more work, you get a blazingly fast app that works incredibly well locally and has a sync process. And I've built a couple of apps this way, and one of them has a really easy strategy for this, and one of them is much more complex with Replicache. So my breakdancing app called The Break, or The Break app, is using naive sync with Dexy. And naive sync isn't a thing. I made this up as a term, but it's just a very naive way of syncing. I made something, save it to the local database in the background. Something changed, like it doesn't work with multiplayer. It doesn't work with conflict resolution very well. But if I'm one person using this application on my phone and I'm not expecting there to be any other conflict there, it works exceedingly well for that. And there's also this real sync with Replicache. Now, if we take a look at my Habit Path app, this is using Replicache. And I could pop open the network requests here if we want to see some of this, what's going on. Again, it's storing data in patch messages. And every time I click, you do see that there's a push happening in the background. But now that push is just completed. And even though that push took some time because it's having to do a little bit more work, you'll notice that the client side responded very quickly. In fact, I can toggle this many times, and look, it's only after I stop toggling this many times that the push goes out. What's so cool about this is that it feels native to the user, and mind you, I'm updating the local database here. I'm not doing optimistic UI at all. I'm saving to a database, and then that push happens in the background. So you can see just how fast this application can be. To take a look at some of that code, I'm not going to show too much from this app because we could be here all day, but I want to show you what a push message might look like. So the push message is coming into a SvelteKit API route, right? API sync push. When that push message comes in, first thing we do is obviously we check to make sure that the user has been authenticated. I have a auth package that puts the user information into locals. So if that user has not been authorized or authenticated, they just get bounced right away. And again, it's just a request, even though it's a push message. So that server-side cookie, the HTTP only cookie I have, gets carried along there. But from here, we actually open up a transaction inside of my database technology, and I start to grab all of the patch messages that are coming in. But the first thing I do is I check the versions of all of my things. And if you want to see just how, like, very broadly intense this is, this ends up being, let's see, a 15-step process. And that doesn't even include where we actually update our database. It turns into like a big old switch statement at the end. But what we're doing here is we're checking versions for things, we're calculating the next version, and we're seeing what information is new and what information is old. And at the end of it, we end up saving it to the database and telling our application, good job, it works. There's also the Break app that I mentioned. Now, this one actually uses Pocketbase as its database. So if you want to see an example of local first with Pocketbase, I think this is a good one to check out. And largely what we're doing is, we're subscribing to one of our collections here. And if something has been created or updating, we put it into the database and we tag this little needs sync to be false because it's just come in from the server, right? And then we update our Svelte store with a .push. And likewise, we delete it. But for the most part, what you're doing here when you're adding things or running a sync is very similar to how we did it in the indexed DB and Dexy by itself, like we had with the Production Assistant app, where essentially all I'm doing is when something happens, I run a sync process. That sync process checks to see which of the local moves flags have a needs sync property on them. And if there is a needs sync equals true, what does it do? It sends it along to the server to create it, delete it, update it, etc. Right? And that's pretty amazing because each time we save, we just end up creating the updated move. We put it into our local DB and then we sync. Then we check our local DB and then we make sure everything runs accordingly. So it ends up being very, very simple. And again, this is the entirety of how we're working with the database. Since it's Pocketbase, all of these calls happen from the client side. All right, let's get back into it. There's also these full takeover ones where it's Triplet, Evolu, InstantDB. These ones require much higher levels of buy-in. Triplet is effortless. It's a custom ORM. It's open source. You can check it out. It's fairly new. And I want to say a lot of these are fairly new, so they're possibly be dragons, right? Evolu is effortless. You can self-host it. It uses Keasley as an ORM, so it's not like you have to learn a new ORM if you know Keasley. But they have a built-in auth system. I love this project, but like they really are pushing this mnemonic auth system on you. And I gotta say, I don't know if users are gonna flock to want to use this. I think it might turn off your average everyday user. Technical folks, they might like it, but your everyday user is not going to want to save a mnemonic somewhere instead of creating a password. And there's also InstantDB, which is newer. It's effortless. It's a custom ORM. It feels more like working with something like Firebase or Pocketbase. But it's closed source. You can't self-host it, and it doesn't require major buy-in. If you're building an InstantDB, you are building an InstantDB, sort of like Firebase, right? But I also think there's like another option here that I'm really excited about. Now, there are several future options. I think Prisma's working on something. We talked to the folks at Prisma on a syntax episode. They talked about working on local first. So if you're a Prisma user, you have that to be really excited about. I think there's a lot of these new technologies about to hit really hard. One of them is Zero. Zero is from the folks at Replicache, and because Replicache is so mature, they've been working on it for so long, they basically took some of those ideas and it's like, what if we did all that for you and made a platform that you can bring your own database, you can bring your own information, but we're going to do all the hard stuff, all the caching, all the syncing. We're going to do all that for you. And I'm not going to spoil too much about Zero here because they've yet to do their full announcement of what it is. But there's a really great blog post on this that just kind of goes over their ideas for Zero. I personally have gotten my hands on Zero. I personally wrote the Svelte bindings for it. So once it releases here and you use Zero Svelte, you're going to see just how incredible it is. Now, the last thing I want to share is something that I've been working on. This is not complete yet. And in fact, because Zero is not released yet, chances are by the time you're hearing this, this won't be available as it will be. But I'm working on this as a SvelteKit starter with Zero. And right now it is a SvelteKit starter with Pocketbase, and I've been using it to rapidly build apps. But I actually have been always wanting it to be a local first platform from the start. And I've had this kind of dream of a local first meteor with Svelte. And the idea here is that out of the box, you would get effortless local first via Zero. You would have auth. You would have templates. In fact, that's something I think a lot of full stack frameworks kind of get wrong these days is like Meteor came with a login template when you started. You could just drop that into your application and you had a login, right? You didn't have to use it. You could always use their functions to do login and build your own. But the default one was really pretty good. And that's kind of what I want to get out of this, right? It also comes with an email system. So just simply by loading up the application, all emails will be printed to the console, unless of course you have your email details for your email sending service. So that way you just plug those in and bingo, you have your auth sending emails, sending verification links, all that stuff out of the box. So it has a base theme with a built-in grid system. Of course, these are all drop-in features that you do not have to use if you don't want to, but there is a fluid text system. There is a really super great grid system and a default theme with CSS variables and some really great default classes out of the box, which of course you can dump for your own CSS framework of choice. There's also an ORM. It uses Drizzle behind the scenes to do your migrations, to build your queries for the server side, and also take care of those migrations and stuff we need for the auth, right? It uses Postgres via Zero. And the best part is it's 100% Svelte 5 and SvelteKit based. So I'll be having a lot more on this right now. If you do want to get involved with this project, you can find it on my GitHub. It's just drop-in. Again, right now it is a fully functional Pocket Base starter that I've been adding on to. It's in pre-alpha, right? But I have been using it to rapidly build apps. But I think the dream for it could be so much bigger. So if you want to learn more about this project, get involved in its development and see where it's at, I'm really excited to share with you what this could be once we're able to show more with Zero as a platform. So that's all I have for you today. I want to say thank you so much for giving this a watch. Again, syntax.fm. If you want to stay involved with new web tech, check out what's going on, get explainers, or just listen to two dudes who really love this tech talk about it all the time. So thanks so much for watching and listening, and I will see you in the next one.
Hello again, Brittany.
Hello. Seems
What do you
like
think?
everyone is really excited to check that out. That sounds amazing,
Yep.
Scott. Congratulations, I guess, or like, I don't know. Like, I'm excited to try it. Can't wait to hear more about
I'm
it.
excited.
Yeah.
It's using Pocket Base as well, which I kind of
Which we
like.
know you love.
Yeah. So we were talking in the chat earlier about pineapple on pizza, and Italians were very upset about this. So I managed to snag some snacks here. I don't know if you can read
Cheese
what it
snack?
says. Cheese snacks. I don't know if they're oven baked Italian cheese bites. Sounds illegal. Like,
Is Paolo going to come back and fight you?
I don't know.
He's got angry face. Speaking of
to
Paolo,
be
though,
fair, I think that's about the pineapple stuff.
Oh yeah, still. Speaking of Paolo, though, I do want to say thank you to Paolo for creating threads for us in the Discord for each of the talks. Thank you to Kareem for doing things behind the scenes. Several people that are working on this, not just us that you see up here, me messing up descriptions and talks. But, yeah,
it happens.
We're doing our best here.
Yeah. All right. So we have 4 sessions left. So without further ado, let's get into the last one before we go for a short break. So here's Michael. He is going to talk about, well, the title is Building a Minimum Viable Rich Text Editor with Svelte 5. And he's very, very thrilled by the capabilities of and the simplicity of Svelte 5. So this is going to be fun to see what is a minimum viable rich text editor. I have no idea.
Something I'm interested
So
So, hello, Svelte people. My name is Michael and I'm from Austria, from Linz. And today I would like to talk about web-based rich text editing, or more specifically, web-based content editing. And before we go into what I really want to present to you, give you some quick history. So I was involved in a project called Substance.js, which we developed over the course of 10 years or something like that. And the goal of it was to have a foundation for a really sophisticated editing environment. So we were basically building this also open source editor called Texture, and like scientific journals were integrating this into their publishing workflows. So it had things like automatic referencing, that creates a reference list dynamically. It had just like crazy requirements, and our goal was to basically have just like a content-oriented approach. So you don't do styling like in Microsoft Word or in maybe even LaTeX, where you have so much style things. It's really about entering content and getting an XML, like a really structured format out of it. Long story short, this was very hard to do. We ended up with a lot of code. It stabilized, but it never really got like completely production ready, just also because the requirements were so tough. It was really hard to do. So many years later, like last year, I was experimenting with another idea, which was basically lowering the scope and just saying, okay, let's make websites directly editable, so that you don't have to use this like write something in HTML or Markdown, hit publish and compile and so on. So it should be really live. And this editable website project, I was like winning the second prize there. Thank you for that, at the last Svelte Hackathon. And yeah, so this is how this worked. You can just make changes, save them, and that's it. Of course, with some limited capabilities. And since then, I was really working more on this idea, and I even found a partner who is working with me on that, and we built basically 4 clients. So we built websites for them, but we didn't use a CMS. Like we instead just used this technique here, but we evolved the project to make it more flexible and so on. So here's an example. This is like a site that we just launched. Like a real estate in Germany. And the cool thing here is you can press Command E and then everything gets in place, editable. Yeah, and basically you can manage your stuff all from inside the site. So you don't have a separate admin panel. Everything is here. You can create pages and so on. Because there is no time, I will not go into more detail here. But just so much is like running on SQLite, and everything is just live rendered, and there's no kind of static generation and so on. Like everything is dynamic. But yeah, using SQLite, it's actually pretty fast. So in a reload here, it's really fast. Okay, but we kind of hit the limits of what you can do with just a plain content editable. So maybe I can demo this here. I mean, we had just like using Markdown just so we can keep things plain text, and we had to use a lot of workarounds. We were not quite happy with like the editing experience here. It's good, but it could be better. And so I started a couple of months ago to work on just this topic in isolation. What I wanted to mention is also that in order to do this, you cannot just pull in a huge rich text editing library, for instance. Like you need to be really humble with your kilobytes that you ship to the client, because you don't want to like load something ad hoc and so on. So it should be really just everything small, so the website can be basically served to readers as much as to writers or like editors, the same code base, and just keep it very small. Yeah, and basically this is the result of a couple of 100 hours that I spent since the summer. Also thank you for Johannes, who jumped in yesterday and did a little like design for it, bit of illustrations. And yeah, basically same thing here. But yeah, I just like, the goal is really to keep this very minimal. And speaking of Svelte 5, so we're using Svelte 5 since longer than a year, I guess. So really very early adopters. Everything is stabilizing now, so we don't have any Svelte 5 problems at the moment. Other problems, but not Svelte 5 related. And yeah, I figured that it's actually ideal to have something like Svelte to do the rendering and to have signals who are just updating fine-grained parts of the document. So actually a lot of things that we had to do in Substance, like manually, like our whole component thing and event handling and really like updating the DOM in a fine granular way, is much easier. And I will just demo you a bit how this looks like, and then we have maybe a few minutes to just jump into the code. Yeah, so basically you have a text cursor, you can edit text, nothing surprising here. But if you have a selection that goes, so as you see here, this is not a typical like Word document where you just have text, like, you know, lines, and you press enter. It's really structured. So you have like, this is, we call it a story block, and it has a title and it has a description. So you can edit those, and you can treat this whole thing as a block. And you can also select multiple ones. So we kind of like have some selection mapping going on. And yeah, you can just like delete this, for instance. You can undo, redo stuff. And what is also new is like, we wanted to have really a Chrome-less experience. So we didn't want to put a lot of, sorry, like the do not disturb on, put it back, focus. Great. Okay, so we didn't want to clutter the interface, like the canvas as we call it, with a lot of UX elements, because we want it to be really simple to just write a component and don't have, like, the component shouldn't know about the selection rendering, like here, like this rectangle here. So like maybe to show you like how the story block looks like, it's just, you know, basically a bit of Svelte code, and it just delegates to these text things which make the text magic going on. This is just a regular image. And what is important is just like, this is kind of the protocol, these few options you need to provide so that the Svelte component can pick up on it and kind of use it to map selections and so on. So yeah, from a usage perspective, it's very easy. Yeah, already 9 minutes. Oh my God, time runs so fast. So yeah, what is special here is like you have a cursor, which is basically a container cursor, and it just works like a text cursor, but instead of characters, you have blocks. And so you can do backspace, and you can do undo, redo, and you can also do up and down arrow and so on, delete. So just make that feel very natural and not have like some UI elements that cluttering the interface that you need to think about and so on. And yeah, just to give you a little overview here, basically this is just evolved around basically taking a DOM selection and mapping it to an internal selection, like our data model. And then the other way around, like you you set a selection, because after some, like you hit the enter, you need to set the selection in the model, and then you need to render it to the DOM. And the way we do this here is just, using an effect, render selection, and here is some, DOM mapping code. You also get first, we take the text and the container selection out, compare it if it has changed, so we don't end up in an endless loop, basically. And yeah, so this render selection is one key piece, and then you have the what is it? Yeah, like on selection change. Yeah, so this is really like the magic. There's still some bugs in it and so on, but most things are working. And yeah, we're gonna release this in the next couple of days, and we hope that people can use it like as a template, just to copy and paste the whole thing and really edit everything. It's not a library, it's really just a template that kind of demonstrates you can build a rich text editor with like yourself in 1,000, maybe in the end it will be 2,000 lines of codes once we support cut and paste and these kind of things. But we really want to keep it minimal and want to encourage people to do this kind of stuff with Svelte 5. All right, that's from my side. Thank you very much.
That was cool.
That was really cool. I was so excited to see that one. I didn't realize it was the same people that had done the hackathon with the editable.website, which was awesome even back then when I saw it. So a use case for this, people keep saying like CMS or use WordPress or something, but if you have a designer or someone who either isn't tech friendly or doesn't want to go into the CMS and wants to see their updates like right where they are, like being on the website and just being able to edit and update it is a huge improvement from like the abstraction of a CMS. And it's my goal to like do that on our documentation site so that my designer can just go in there and make updates. Right now we're having to use like a Jira template to like, and then I have to update them and do the whole PR thing. But yeah, like so cool. I can't wait to see more from this.
Yeah, same. So we're going to do a short break until 1:15, wherever, I don't know what time it is in the viewers' time zone, but in 13 minutes, we're going to be back, and then we're going to hear some news from the Svelte maintainers.
Ooh, so that's going to be interesting. Wonder what that is.
Yeah. right. We are
was
back
amazing.
from a long break. No, it
Refreshing break.
wasn't. It wasn't that long. All right. So I think people wanna see what's about to go down.
Oh yeah.
So without further ado, I like that phrasing. It's nice. Said it twice now. Here is Ben McCann, and we'll hear about something new.
Hi, this is Ben.
Are you the Ben McCann who maintains SvelteKit?
Yes, I'm a maintainer. Can I ask who's calling?
I'm the new Svelte benevolent dictator for life. Woof, woof, woof.
Why are you barking like a dog? And isn't that Rich's job?
I am an LLM and have rendered myself in dog form to appear more friendly to humans. We need a new website for Svelte 5, complete with testing, styling, database access, and auth. Use Markdown for the docs. Oh, and we'll want to add internationalization before long.
If you're an LLM, why don't you write the code? And what have you done with Rich?
I'm unable to provide information about Svelte 5 or Rich Harris, as my last update was in October 2023. I recommend checking the Svelte website or reliable sources for the latest information. Goodbye.
We've all been there. Well, maybe not the part where an LLM replaces your colleague. Yet. But having to set up a new application and researching everything that you want to be a part of that application, deciding on all the best practices, and figuring out how to tie those all together in a way that works. Well, today, we've got a solution for that.
And so, today, we are announcing...
Right. Svelte has historically had a number of different CLIs. If you wanted to create a new project, you could do that with npm create svelte at latest. If you wanted to add functionality to an existing project, you could do that with the community maintained svelte add CLI. And if you wanted to migrate your code from SvelteKit 1 to SvelteKit 2 or from Svelte 4 to Svelte 5, you could do that with Svelte Migrate. Well, today, these all live in a single tool called SV. Let's dive into the first of these commands, npx sv migrate svelte 5. This will migrate your code so that you can try out Svelte 5 on your project. And shout out to Simon who built this. This tool's done a fantastic job on the code bases I've run it on. I ran it on a code base with over 300 Svelte files, and it migrated all of them. It allowed me to run the project right out of the box, and it put legacy helpers in about 50 or 60 files that I'll have to manually migrate, but I can do that over the next year or two as I get time, and my project will be running on Svelte 5 that entire time, and using the Svelte 5 rune syntax in all files. The most exciting part of the new SV CLI is the ability to add integrations to your project when you create it with SV Create or later on with SV Add. Historically, when you set up a SvelteKit project, you had the option to set up ESLint, Prettier, Playwright, or VTest, but you could only do it when you set up your project and you couldn't do it later on. Or you could add a limited number of other things such as Tailwind with the community-run Svelte Add project. But you had to do that later in a second step, and I can't tell you how many people I saw ask, how do you set up Tailwind, even though it was right there with the Svelte Add. And so what we've done is we've integrated all of those into a single screen that allows you to do all of that during project creation, or if you want, you can do it later on. So let's walk through the options that are available. First up is Prettier. Prettier is a code formatter. You can run it on your code base with the Svelte Prettier plugin, and it will format all of your files so that you don't have to worry about reviewing your colleagues' code for little formatting issues, and you can focus on the real issues that are present. Next up is ESLint. It's a very popular linting tool that allows you to find common categories of problems in your code base so that you can avoid them and be warned about them right in your editor. Next up is vtest. And there are a couple of things that make vtest really great. One is that it uses your existing v toolchain to transform your TypeScript and Svelte files into JavaScript so it can be tested. And another thing that's great about it is it has really great support for ESM. SvelteKit is ESM only, and that can cause other unit testing frameworks trouble when trying to run your tests against them. Another familiar one is Playwright. Playwright allows you to do end-to-end tests in the browser against your application. You can stand up a server and hit it with the browser just like users were going to be hitting your app, so that you can tell that your app is working end-to-end. Then we have Tailwind, which is perhaps the most popular CSS package out there. And for a while you've been able to set up Tailwind with Svelte Add. But if you check it out with SV, we've added a few new goodies, and you can now set up Tailwind plugins when you set it up with SV. If you're building an application, there's a pretty good chance you need to store or access data in a database, so we're providing a Drizzle integration to help you do that. This is new functionality you couldn't find before in npm create Svelte or in Svelte Add. And it gives you a query builder, a lightweight ORM, and a package to manage your schema and do migrations between versions. Another really common need in any application is authentication and authorization, the ability to sign up, log in, log out, determine which users can access which pages. And so for that, we're providing a Lucia integration. Now, Lucia historically has been a library, but moving forward is going to be offered as a guide showing you how to do auth. And this integration follows that guide. So we hope that you'll try it out. One of the most used packages in the Svelte ecosystem is MDSpecs. It renders Markdown and is super popular for building things like blogs. If you're coming from another framework, you might be familiar with MDX, and this is Svelte's version of it. Lots of sites have a need for internationalization, for translating the site into a bunch of different languages and allowing users to access the site in their local language. And for that, we're providing a Paraglide integration. The Paraglide team have been great partners on this and have actually built a lot of the functionality within SvelteKit that's required to do internationalization. We're also offering a Storybook integration out of the box. Storybook is a front-end component workshop that lets you develop and test your components in isolation. It's great if you're building a UI library or something similar to that. And one of the really great things about this integration is that it's maintained by the Storybook team. So you know it's going to work well with Storybook. What this one does is it actually goes and it runs an external command, Storybook init. And of course, there's so much more you might want to add to a project. So we're going to be supporting community integrations. If you were looking for your favorite tool and didn't see it listed there, we'd love to work with you to build an integration for it. We're going to be taking some of the code that we're already using to build the integrations and clean it up so that it's easier for others to use. So if you're interested, file an issue, let us know which adder you'd like to build for your integration, and we'll work with you to get that done. This wouldn't have been possible without a lot of help from a number of people, but a couple of folks I wanted to thank especially. First off is Christopher Brown. The SV name was already registered on NPM, and he very graciously allowed us to use it for this project. And of course, Adrian and Manuel, who wrote so much of the code for SV. Thank you. I hope you'll give SV a try. It's available on NPM now, and you can use it to migrate your existing projects to Svelte 5 or to create your new Svelte 5 project.
Wow.
That's all I have to say. That's wonderful. I'm so glad to see that finally integrated. Svelte Add was such a great thing, but like not enough people knew about it. And now that we have an integrated way to add and create all those things, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I'm super stoked about this this thing. I've been harping around in the ambassadors channel about adding auth out of the box for I don't know how long. People probably hate me for always talking about it, but it is what it is.
No, I mean, it's a pain to set up all of that stuff manually, so it's amazing.
Yeah. All right. So we are on to the next talk. This is from Rich Harris himself, the creator of Svelte. I think you've heard about him. Maybe you haven't. If you haven't, this is him. So without further ado, welcome, Rich. You're going to do this live, so I'm going to take us off the stream.
All right. Am I here? Are we doing this? Are we doing it live? Okay, let's go. If you've seen me do videos before, you'll notice that I am not in my usual habitat. There are no brick walls behind me, no plants slowly dying because I forgot to water them. I'm actually in the suburbs right now. I'm at my mother-in-law's house. She could wander past at any moment, which would be exciting. So fingers crossed the Wi-Fi holds up for at least the next 10 minutes or so. You're probably also thinking, boy, he looks tired. First of all, rude that you would say that. But second of all, you're not wrong. I and many other members of the team have been on overdrive for a while now, trying to get stuff lined up so that we'd have a big announcement ready for the summit. And I'm not just talking about the CLI, which I'm really excited about. Massive kudos to Manuel and Adrian and Ben, who have been leading the charge on that. I think you're going to absolutely love it. No, we have another announcement. Now, you all know what we've been working on. We've been talking about it for over a year at this point. You've seen talks and tweets and blog posts and demos, and it would be a waste of all of our time if I showed you all of the things that I've already showed you. So instead, I'm just going to skip right ahead to today's announcement. We are about to publish the next version of our website. So let me give you a little walkthrough of what we're about to release. I think Kevin has shared my screen now so that I can show you this. This is a preview deployment. This isn't svelte.dev yet, but it will be very soon. You'll notice that the URL is the Svelte Omni site, and there's a reason for that. It's that we have decided to combine all of the sites into one. When I joined Vercel a few years ago, one of the first things that Guillermo said to me was, why do you have these separate sites for Svelte and SvelteKit and the tutorial and everything? It's kind of confusing. Like if I have a question and I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be, like it doesn't make sense. SvelteKit is the officially recommended way to build Svelte apps, and yet it's sort of tucked away in a different place. And that's no longer true. This is a single unified site. So if I want to search for something like, say, how do I deploy my Svelte app to Vercel, then I can do that. It's all here in one place. Eventually, it's going to include documentation for Vite plugin Svelte, ESLint plugin Svelte, the brand new CLI, all of that other stuff. It's just going to be here in one place, so you won't have to hunt and peck around GitHub to find the information that you're looking for. This is not finished. It's very close to finished, but it is not finished. So if you do go to this URL, I encourage you to do so. You'll probably find a few things that are a little bit lacking in polish. But we've had a nice big facelift. We still have the same logo. We still have this beautiful artwork designed by Akim Vedam, the Svelte machine where your code goes in and the components come out. But a lot of the rest of the site has been given a little bit of an upgrade, starting with the tagline. No more cybernetically enhanced web apps. It's now web development for the rest of us. You'll notice when you look at a lot of websites for open source projects, they talk about what the project does, but it's really hard to encapsulate the entirety of what something like Svelte does in a few words. And so we thought, instead of talking about the tool, why not talk about the users? And web development for the rest of us really encapsulates something that I believe quite strongly, which is that a lot of people building stuff on the web kind of feel like a lot of the things that exist in the front end world aren't exactly designed with us in mind. It sort of feels like it's for somebody else. And Svelte is designed to be a project that is accessible to the largest number of people. So it's kind of like we are the 99% of front-end development. We don't have bento boxes full of features. Like the documentation is where you learn about the features. The homepage is where you learn about what the thing is. And so we have a very short description of what Svelte is and some screenshots from surveys showing that people really enjoy using it. We have a little video with some of your favorite Svelte celebrities, and then some photos from the in-person conference in Stockholm in 2022, which was such a great time, and I can't wait to do that again and hang out with you all. I'm sure you'll recognize a lot of the faces on this screen. And then, of course, we have an acknowledgement of the countless contributors and donors who have made all of this possible. We don't have everyone on here. If we did, then you would just be scrolling forever. But we have an awful lot of people. So if you're not on here, you are very much on here, at least in our hearts. So that's the homepage. As I say, we have documentation now for Svelte and SvelteKit on a single site. Eventually, we will have everything else too. And you might notice that things look a little different than they do on the current site. We have a bit of a new visual identity. On the old site, we used the Overpass font for everything. Overpass, as the name suggests, is actually a typeface that is derived from something called Highway Gothic, which is what is used for road signage here in the US. And as you might imagine, it's designed to be read as you're speeding down the highway, looking at a short piece of text. It's not really designed for body copy. It's not really designed for user interfaces and so on. And we really felt, or I felt, that we had overused Overpass and that it was time to rethink our typography a little bit. At the same time, I don't know about you, but I am sick to death of modern web design. Right? Everything is grid-based. There's purple glowy shit everywhere for some reason. And every site uses sans serif fonts for everything. It's totally homogeneous and uninspiring, I think. And it's unique to the tech world. And most content sites use tasteful serifs to render their content. If you go to any newspaper or magazine website, most blogs, they all use serif type because that's what historically humans have used to render body copy. Serif fonts have more personality. They make the text feel more conversational as opposed to, robotic. And so I'm saying enough is enough. I'm declaring war on sans serif fonts. We use a selection of fonts now on our website. We have DM serif display for the headings, EB Garamond for the body copy. The UI elements, they use Fire Sans, and the code, or these snippets, are in Fire Mono. And I know that a lot of you are thinking, Rich, we don't care. This is boring. But we care a lot. You would not believe how much time the maintainers and ambassadors have spent arguing about fonts over the last few weeks. We almost spent thousands of dollars of open collective money on font licenses, but eventually we found some pairings that we really like from Google Fonts instead. I realize that this is a bit of an adjustment. Like, a lot of people are looking at this and thinking, wow, this doesn't really look like a documentation site. I'm not so sure about this. It might take some adjusting. And we might need to tweak things a little bit to make sure that it looks really good on, you know, Windows machines and so on. So bear with us as we dial it in. But hopefully you'll come to the new site and you'll feel that this looks a little bit fresh and a little bit different and a little bit more enjoyable to read. The tutorial has also been given a facelift. If you've used learn.svelte.dev, our interactive tutorial that covers all of Svelte and all of SvelteKit, then you'll be familiar with this basic format. But you'll be familiar as well with the fact that it takes a minute to start the tutorial because it's built using something called web containers. Web containers are essentially a way to run Node applications inside your browser, which is what we need in order to run SvelteKit because it's based on Vite, which runs on Node. But when we're teaching Svelte, we don't need all of SvelteKit. And so we've actually split it up into two sections. We have the Svelte tutorial, which just runs in Rollup in a web worker. And then when you advance to the SvelteKit tutorial, that's when we use the web container technology so that we can run Vite. And so hopefully you'll find that as you're using the tutorial, everything is going to be just a little bit faster and slicker to start up. And also it will work on mobile now. I know a lot of people tried to access the tutorial on iPhones and it would crash because web containers use too much memory. The REPL is now called the Playground, just a slightly more friendly name that's a better description of what it does. And if you've been using the preview site for Svelte 5, then you'll know that when you edit stuff in here, it generates a hash link that you can share without saving anything to a database, which is really good for simple demos and throwaway stuff. And so now if I defocus that, I get a hash link that encapsulates the content of this playground. If I want, I can save it. And then I have a stable link that I can share with people that will stay up to date. Kevin, if I can stop sharing the screen. A lot of you, sorry, bear with me a sec. All right, so that's it. We have a brand new site. It's going to be going up real soon. It's been an absolute blast working on it, and we hope you love it. There is one more thing. A lot of you keep asking when Svelte 5 is going to be released, and today I have an answer for you. Svelte 5 is going to be released right now. We're going to do it right here on the stream. While I've been jibber-jabbering about fonts, the team has been putting the finishing touches on everything. In theory, Penguin has just opened a PR that, once merged, should trigger a release. Now, there's so much effort that goes into something like this. And I know that I'm sort of the public face of Svelte. I'm like Bez from the Happy Mondays. It's actually a huge number of people who have made this possible, including all of you who have taken the time to try Svelte out in its pre-release state and have given us so much incredible feedback. This release belongs to all of you. And so in recognition of that fact, Kevin, Brittany, if folks are backstage, then can we let them in and we can do this release together? All right, the gang's all here. So let me see if I can find that pull request. Kevin, actually, if you can share my screen once more. Here we go. Here's the release Svelte 5 pull request.
I think you need to share your screen, and there's a bunch of people hammering away somewhere. So okay. Can you present again?
Here we go.
There you go.
Okay, so here it is, the Svelte 5 release PR. Dominic has approved it. I trust him. I'm not going to wait for CI to complete. YOLO. And I think that's it. I think we just did it. All we need to do now is wait for the action to complete, and then it'll be there on NPM, and you can start using it. Penguin is covering his mouth as if something terrible has just happened.
He doesn't have the permissions.
It should be fine. I'm just obviously nervous in case I'm wrong.
So for context, we use change sets on our repositories to manage releases. And so when you make a pull request, you add a change set, and then when you merge that, the change sets bot will open another pull request that when you merge it, it does the NPM release. And what we've found in the past is that we have so many change sets that when we exit pre-release mode and try and do a stable release, change sets breaks. We've managed to break change sets in the past because our releases are so large. And in order to prevent that, we have a custom script written by Penguin that is hopefully going to prevent that from happening. Has anyone?
Yeah, there's a type error in the build or something.
No.
Okay, scratch that back. Everyone back to Svelte 4, please.
Yeah, generated types have changed. Regenerate types locally. I think it's the version.
Okay.
The version changed.
All right, I'm pulling the latest main. Do I need to open a new
It doesn't matter.
PR?
Any push will re-trigger and it will publish. But we need it to get there.
Is this a generated version file?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it pulls from the package.
Okay, I'm regenerating. Maybe I should share my screen again so that you can see what I can see.
This was easier for SvelteKit live on stream. There were no generated things in there.
Is that the diff that we expect?
Yeah, I think so.
Also, the team look nice.
Sorry, Rich, was that dark mode I saw in your terminal?
It is. This is what happens when I'm working late at night.
You're straight from the light.
Okay, take two.
Okay, so the release workflow is running. You can look at the progress here. This is how the sausage gets made, I guess.
I just got to say, it's a good sausage, though.
Hey.
Full bank of green lights. We like to see that. Is this going to be a problem? Package svelte.dev must depend on the current version of Svelte 5 versus 4.2. I hope not.
No, I think it's a monorepo dependency that just isn't updated correctly, but it won't affect the package.
Yeah. You can always
So
ignore
there's still Svelte 4 somewhere in the monorepo? That's interesting. Oh, maybe the current site. Which is
I think it just happened.
Let's go to NPM and see.
Nope, that's the wrong one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. That's it. We've done it. So next steps then. For us, we need to go away and write up an announcement blog post that we can share with the wider world on Monday. For all of you watching, time to go and upgrade your apps, I guess. Kevin, Brittany, back to you.
Wow.
It's time for all of you to go and get some sleep, get some rest, and take the weekend off. Enjoy yourselves. Congratulations.
But for the rest of us, there's still one more thing.
You're even surprising me. I don't know what you're talking about anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. So while we're waiting for this next person to come on, Willow, well, we can talk about the conference, I guess. What do you think? It's been a nice.
I thought it was a fantastic conference. That was honestly, I was surprised because we got like 3 new things.
Yeah.
And
a lot of new stuff
too. And then
the CLI.
The surprise. There's always a surprise, but that was a lot of surprises, a lot of good surprises. I feel like Christmas came early.
Yeah. And then there are more surprises as well coming. Well, we'll see. We're currently waiting on Willow. So whenever she's ready and joins the stream, you don't want to miss this last thing.
She's a ghost.
Especially if you're a developer.
She's a ghost. You can't see her.
That's true. That's why. I see.
Trying to make silly jokes waiting.
Yeah.
There she is.
All right. There she is. All right. Let's bring her on. Hello, Willow. Sorry, Willow. And then Brady's here as well. What a surprise.
Surprise.
Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Welcome. So what do you guys have to share with us today? Do you want to... Should I present my screen right now? Maybe? Or maybe it's better if you share your screen, actually.
Okay, I can do that.
I'm like on the edge of my seat waiting. I have no idea what's coming.
So, those of you...
Wait. All right. Yep. Do you want to say something before I share the screen, or?
No, I mean, those of you last year who were around might have remembered an event we did. It lasted a couple months, and we've been working hard everyone has to bring you it again. And so we've got Svelte 2024 Runes Edition.
Nice.
This is awesome. Look at that.
That is
rune.
That is actually a rune-powered rune. There's
oh, really?
yeah. The animations and stuff are all it's a bunch of 3JS stuff, but in a .svelte.ts file with some rune action going on.
I remember you sharing this image, and I actually have it as you can kind of see it there, the background on my phone.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so let's go through the hackathon here. So, as you mentioned, last year we did a hackathon. It was a great success, I think. A lot of people enjoyed it. We got a lot of awesome submissions, and we got to see like one of those projects worked on even further today by Michael with the editable website thing.
Oh yeah. So
this time around, we also have prizes, 15 prizes that are, so first place is $3,000. That's a lot of money.
Not too shabby.
Yeah. Second place, 1,000. Third, fourth, and fifth, $250 each. And I guess we can talk about the categories as well.
Yeah, sure. The Whizbangery is a famous category from last time, which is basically just something awesome and fun and novel. and then the Rune Ritualist. So we kind of had fun with the names here this year, but it's basically just a way to really push the boundaries of what runes unlock, and just take them as far as they can go.
Maybe even further.
And Migration Magician. So this is basically this is just the upgrading existing Svelte 4 code bases, whether that's code bases that you own or big libraries that you like to use, if it's PRs to various ones. This is going to be a big effort to go through all of the different projects that in the community that haven't been updated yet, and push them over the finish line. So I'm really excited to see how much damage we could do there.
Yeah, I hope we have a lot of submissions on that one. Get all those libraries ready for Svelte 5.
Yeah. And I think so. I just want to give a huge shout out to the two of you. You've been working on this for the last couple of weeks like crazy people, I think. I feel like that's the vibe I've been getting.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of work.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the important part. So there are a bunch of rules. I don't think we need to really go through them like line by line. We can just mention that it has to be a new project that you start now and not before Svelte Summit.
Yeah, if we get submissions in the next couple hours, we're going to be a little bit suspicious.
Yes. Yeah, for the migration one, of course, like that's it makes sense for that to
have started before, but the migration to start today because it just released.
Exactly. Yeah. And so final submissions are January 10th, I think. Yep. And then we'll see who wins the prizes, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice new conveniences that Willow has added, and the backend side you can do things like easily edit or completely withdraw your submission, and you have preferences for contact, stuff like that. So it should make it straightforward and easy to manage, whether you're just a team of one or a team of 3 or 2.
It's a beautiful site.
Awesome.
Good job.
It is very nice. It actually looks very nice in light mode as well.
Oh yes. I made a new dark light system switcher thing. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Paulo just hit her face. She was like,
flashbang.
All right. Is there anything else we wanna talk about the site? Or
no, just really excited to see what everybody comes up with, and we hope that people have a lot of fun with it. The submissions last year were absolutely unbelievable. So much amazing stuff. I mean, tools and libraries that are used, today by hundreds and hundreds of us, and
I mean, you can actually, if you go to the winners page, Willow, maybe we can look at last year's winners.
Yep.
Oh, and there's a tracker of years on here. Y'all are right.
So many people probably have heard of Superforms, but maybe you didn't know that was actually like a semi result of the hackathon. I think there were ideas about it before, but like
and then on this site now.
And we're using it here.
Oh, nice. Superformception. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then Svelte Lab as well.
Svelte Lab is it's a classic. It's a staple in the community now. People, Svelte community members, you're constantly using it to share reproductions of whole SvelteKit sites.
Yeah.
There are so many great things that came out of the hackathon, and I think we're only going to get even more this time.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I think with that said, thank you for joining us, Brady, Willow.
Thank you.
And we will see you all in the future. All right. So that was a great conference.
That was an amazing conference and so many great
Yeah.
surprises. Yeah.
I'm very excited about the hackathon. Very, very excited.
Yes.
So, any last words, Brittany, before
No,
we end
just
the
everybody
stream?
go team up if you want, like start working on your projects, and I want to see what everybody does. I'm really excited.
All right. Cool. And with that, goodbye, everyone. See you next year.
See you next time. Hopefully in person.
Yes.